Listen, you smell something?
Human emotions are materializing in the form of a viscous psychoreactive plasm with explosive supernormal potential.
What a discovery, a psychoreactive substance.
Do you know what this equipment is used for?
Boggle or Super Mario Brothers?
We'll have fun!
Yeah! They're still doing it. Really quite good work there.
My friend, don't be a jerk.
We've got no choice. Call the Ghostbusters.
Super Jackpot!
Welcome to Extraplasm Podcast. It's the only podcast on the internet that thinks we need a Ghostbusters-themed advent calendar counting down to the 40th anniversary with little tiny Twinkies and boxes of Cheez-Its and shooters of schnapps inside. I'm your host, Jim Maritato, aka Vape Maniac on the internet, and I'm excited to bring you this week's episode as we're joined by Tony Taylor and Jason Fitzsimmons, two of my favorite people who come on the podcast regularly, to chat a bit about the digital release of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. So we get into a conversation here about the deleted scenes, about the featurettes, focusing on the sort of behind-the-scenes information, and we focus a little less on the director's commentary, given that we all bought it from Amazon and couldn't seem to access the director's commentary via that platform. Maybe we're wrong, and if you know how, you can tell me, and I'll be impressed and feel stupid. But I digress. The point being here that was more exciting is that we had an opportunity to talk about the film, its release on digital, its various deleted scenes and whether or not we felt they fit into the movie or how they could have, and sort of to speculate about what other different deleted content may still be out there for us to find, or what other behind the scenes information may be out there for subsequent releases. And so this is a really fun conversation I'm excited to bring to you. And I also have to say a very special thank you to Tony and to Jason for coming on this week. As you heard me say last week, things here are a little stressful, to say the least, and a little bit emotional at times. And putting together the episode this week had its own set of challenges, besides the fact that its host is going through stuff. We had technical issues that cropped up, a codec that changed in the middle of the episode while recording, a problem with the internet. I mean, you name it, everything that could possibly have gone wrong felt like it was going wrong at the time we were recording. And when I sat down to listen to this episode and start to put together, I was sort of overwhelmed emotionally by the fact that I was listening to two of my friends show up and really help put this episode together in a way that was fun. In fact, they tried to take over the podcast in the first 90 seconds. But this is because I have learned from making this podcast that the most valuable thing that I get from it, independent of something like going to a premiere, which was awesome, or interacting with different folks who've come on to be interviewed in the last few weeks who are all wonderful people who I was so excited to talk to, that one of the greatest gifts I get as a result of making this podcast and my rewards are the friendships that I have created as a result of what we all do here as a regular basis. So I want to say thank you to Tony and to Jason for coming on the podcast this week, not only because I always love having them on, but because it was really helpful and really fun to have two friends join the podcast and talk through a lot of what's going on with the digital release and to sort of take my brain off of things that are far more stressful. So they are two awesome people. And of course, as usual, I want to suggest that you support everything they do, but you should do that after you listen to this entire episode because there's a lot here to unpack. And I'm really eager to get into that conversation in a few minutes. But we'll do that after we do what we need to do every week, because we do first need to talk about some Ghostbusters headlines.
Still making headlines all across the country, the Ghostbusters are at it again.
Today, the entire eastern seaboard is alive with talk of incidents of paranormal activity.
On topic today, ghosts and ghost busting.
Extraplasm, read all about it. Ghostbusters headlines coming at ya.
In official Ghostbusters media news, which is now the heading I think I'm going to call this here because I imagine that we're going to run out of Frozen Empire specific news pretty soon. It's time to start talking about official media. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire earned an additional $3 million globally in the last week, while also losing access to 30% of its available screens. And that's something Ghostbusters News has reported in the last week. The film remains just shy of a $200 million milestone for box office worldwide. And that's one that we'll see if it's able to reach as it trickles out of theaters and rushes onto home video. So it's kind of interesting to think about the fact that we are just shy of a $200 million milestone on a film that people are concerned costs $100 million to make. So we're like just shy of doubling the money. My hope is that over the next, last couple weeks that it's in the theater, as it trickles out of different theaters and goes fully to home video, that it will cross that threshold. But even if it doesn't, it's still a pretty great, result to come out at $198 million at global box office, and then still to have digital release going really well. And it's something I said way back, probably about 10 episodes ago, I feel like, suggesting that, there's the accounting for box office, but then there's also the 2024 accounting for things like digital rental, digital purchases, etc. And as Jason also points out over on Ghostbusters News, Frozen Empire took the top spot on, digital download platforms like Amazon, iTunes, and Vudu as soon as it was released, basically. So, kind of interesting to think about the idea that the movie may crack the $200 million mark. And even if it doesn't, it's taking a lot of success already, or receiving a lot of success already via, different platforms and digital releases. Those digital releases have, a whole bunch of different featurettes we talked about last week. There's 6 different deleted scenes and a variety of different featurettes. And it's now been announced that the disc releases of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, the physical media releases for home video, will take place on June 25th. All of the special features that are available as part of the digital launch will be on the 4K Ultra HD and standard Blu-ray discs. However, if you're still on DVD, if you're an old school person who refuses to move to newer formats and is still using the same format I watched Ghostbusters on, when I was in college, like at this point 25 years ago, then you are not going to get all the featurettes and all the deleted scenes, probably because they don't fit on the disc, and it'll be limited in terms of extra features to 2 of the featurettes: the Return to the Firehouse Making Ghostbusters featurette and the Busted Capturing the Ghosts of Frozen Empire featurette. So if you're looking to bring this home for home video, digital and Blu-ray and DVD are obviously, or rather not DVD, but Blu-ray are the obvious candidates here for what you should be bringing home if you have the capability to play those discs. This is a good indicator to me of like why you probably want to upgrade if you have not after this long from DVD to Blu-ray, because you're going to miss out on a lot of cool digital features. And, one of the things that's happened in the past week is that as Frozen Empire has been sort of marketed and the digital releases come out, there's been a series of interviews and a media push. And that means that there's been several interviews with Screen Rant between McKenna Grace, Emily Allen Lind, and Ernie Hudson. Each of these is about 8 to 10 minutes long and is hosted by Screen Rant contributor Owen Danoff. And I won't spoil each of these interviews for you because they're all really great. And they're all like 8 to 10 minutes. So it's something you can go spend like your lunch hour or lunch half hour break at work taking a look at over on the Screen Rant's website. But I did want to draw out a couple of things that I thought were really interesting with respects to the characters of Frozen Empire and the narrative lore of Ghostbusters and what it might look like in the future. And one thing I find fascinating about the interview with Emily Allen Lind is how much of it is about her character's background. And in it, she reiterates that on the one hand, she and Gil kicked around a lot of different ideas for Melody's backstory. And so she and Gil Kennan were coming up with different ideas as to what Melody was up to, what her life was like, etc. But she goes on to say that she believes a lot of the story and her relationship with Phoebe is up to a viewer's interpretation, which is something we've heard her say before in other interviews. But she also points out a few times that she sought to play Melody as a quote-unquote wacky character who has lived a quote-unquote crazy life and who has lived both a literally and figuratively life as an old soul. And that's, sort of her phrasing. When asked what a longer-term story could have looked like for Melody where she remained at the firehouse after the events of the movie instead of quantum physics taking hold, Emily Allen Lind responded, "I think Melody has some stuff to work on, some psychological stuff. She needs to go to therapy for a little bit. She needs to go see a family again and tie up some loose ends. 100 years or whatever is a long time to be away. I think that maybe she needs to figure that out a little bit and come back a healthier person. I think that they both have a lot to learn, but I think they'd have such a fun story. I love it. I really do. And not just because I'm in it. Those two characters, Melody and Phoebe, are such outcasts. They're so different, but they're the same in the way that they're nerds. They're special and they're wacky. They're outcasts. One of them is literally a ghost and everyone's scared of her, and the other one's a Ghostbuster and nobody trusts her. They're just figuring it out together, and it's a beautiful teenage friendship, relationship, whatever. At the same time, it's so complicated, I think there's always room to see more of that, so I hope that we do." Now, do I think that there's going to be another role of Melody in the next Ghostbusters movie and that she's going to come back from the land of quantum physics? Probably not. But I do find it fascinating that Emily Allen Lind continues to talk about Melody as a character or a person who's over 100 years old or 100 years old and who's been around New York City, not just, since the 40 years of Ghostbusters or the 80s with her platform shoes, but is instead a character who's supposed to be one that's been around New York for an incredibly long time and who's endured a lot of emotional hardship to the point that they become essentially a prankster, right? That essentially Melody becomes a prankster in the situation and starts to screw with the New Yorkers because what else is she going to do? She's a 16-year-old kid who's been stuck there as a 16-year-old for 100 years. So it's kind of interesting to consider and think about and juxtapose with other interpretations that she might be, you know, less old, or she might only be as old as the Ghostbusters or something. Nevertheless, it's kind of exciting to see her kind of give this confirmation one more time that the intention, at least, was for her to have, you know, an open-ended backstory, but at least to also know that she probably had a crazy or difficult life, and that she also was, like, you know, a century separated from her family, which kind of motivates her actions in the plot a lot more than if she just hadn't seen them for like 10 years. McKenna Grace also spoke with Screen Rant's Owen Danoff, and in their conversation, they revealed some new information about unused footage in the final film that we've yet to see and that isn't available in the deleted scenes on the home release of the movie. When asked which of the characters she enjoyed playing out a relationship with most, in a kind of surprising turn, she talked not about the dynamic between Phoebe and Melody as one might expect, but rather about McKenna Grace, ends up talking about how James Acaster shared scenes with her that were cut from the film, wherein they established a relationship as two smart people who basically took pleasure in deriding Gary Gruberson. I have to say, I really wish we got to see this, because from my perspective, this is an element that would have been interesting to see play out, set against Gary's arc of trying to move from step teacher to father figure, you know? And so he's like, at the beginning of our movie, we have him standing there in front of Walter Peck defining himself as step teacher, this really weird, you know, definition, and saying, well, you know, we don't need to deal with labels. And by the end of it, he's clearly, you know, accepting the label of dad and overwhelmed emotionally. It would have been kind of fun to see Phoebe kind of pick at him a little bit, and to see how that played into the dynamic of him hoping to be accepted as a father figure or trying to navigate that role. It doesn't hurt the film, I guess, to not see it, but to know that, like, the performers who were sort of carrying out that dynamic are missing it means I kind of miss it too, and would love to see what that looked like. And McKenna Grace also goes on to note her appreciation for the relationships between Phoebe and Gary, and the mentoring relationship between Ray and Phoebe in podcast. And this led her to comment further that on set, the OG Ghostbusters had some of their own space to hang out, but the Dan Aykroyd would apparently come into a general cast tent and tell stories to everyone present, which they apparently, she said, meant that about 12 people would sit around and just listen while Dan talked, while they all ate their respective snacks. And I have this image in my mind of Ray in the firehouse, as people are sitting there with bags of Cheez-Its and Twinkies and maybe some snack mix, some trail mix. Maybe there's a health movement that goes on or something in the snack department, thanks to Callie's influence. I don't know. But, you know, I have this image of them all coming together in the firehouse, and Ray coming over from Ray's Occult Books and sitting down and pulling out a folding chair and just beginning to tell stories. And everyone just kind of stops doing what they're doing and eats a snack and listens to Ray. And so I kind of feel like this kind of might have been the same thing on set, which is almost, you know, a heartwarming thing to think about. I like it. So it's kind of cool. I kind of great that, you know, they got to have not just a mentoring relationship in terms of the characters, where you got to see sort of Podcast and Phoebe and etc. be mentored by, you know, Ray Stantz, or you're watching Winston mentor the new form of Ghostbusters, but that kind of seems to have been a thing that happened on the set organically too, as you're interacting with these actors from, you know, a film from 40 years ago who are carrying on a legacy, and new performers who are essentially taking up the mantle from them. And so, you know, in so many ways, it would be lovely to sort of watch how that transpired. It's not something we'll ever get to see probably, but if there's a behind the scenes featurette called Dan Aykroyd Speaks, I hope that it exists, and it's nothing but him telling stories to the rest of the cast while everybody eats a snack. And finally, Ernie Hudson also spoke with Owen Danoff, and they got into talking more about the future lore of Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire's lack of Rick Moranis and Louis Tully. And in discussing the character of Winston Zeddemore, Hudson commented on how he was excited to carry on the mantle of Winston Zeddemore, but to also at the same time maintain his humanity. Like, it was very important for him to show that Winston has experienced growth and success over his 40 years since putting on the flight suit, but he also wanted to make sure that he maintained a human person as he became a billionaire. And he said, and I quote, "I see a lot of characters where the guy becomes very, very successful, but somewhere along the line, they lose their humanity. Winston really appreciates these guys who gave him a job when he really needed it, and he's a very loyal guy. He's an example of what's possible, and that was really, really critical." Which is kind of important to consider. Like, you know, there's sort of this flip of the dynamic that happens in this movie for sure. It started in Afterlife, but in this one, it definitely takes hold where, you know, the guy who was hired as a person who literally showed up and was like, "I'd like a job," and Ray Stantz is like, "Great, you're hired." is now the benefactor, of Ghostbusters and sort of the driving force financially. And so his character is incredibly important because in some ways, I mean, it's weird to think about this, but like Ernie Hudson has sort of begun to fill the like Dan Aykroyd role of marketing Ghostbusters out in the real world and within the, scope of the movie as well. And so it's kind of a really important thing I think he touches on there, that Winston is at root like a good human being and a good person. And it kind of is something that had to carry through as you watched him become, if you will, the Tony Stark or the Nick Fury of ghostbusting, as he put it a few weeks ago. He went on to discuss the expanding lore of Ghostbusters with Danoff and the notion that the Paranormal Research Center and Winston and Ray's roles as contributors but not necessarily active Ghostbusters allows for looking a little bit deeper at ghostbusting as a storytelling premise. And interestingly, he also said that Ghostbusters, or rather Winston's role now as the benefactor of Ghostbusters and the development of the Paranormal Research Center, quote, gave Winston range. When we did the first movie, I would go to schools and make kids honorary Ghostbusters. One of the questions kids would always ask was, where does Winston go? They would ask that because when Winston wasn't on screen, we knew nothing about Winston. We saw the other guys. Ray had his bookshop, Spangler had his lab, and Bill had his TV show. But Winston, we didn't know. For Winston, now to have a lot more levels to play was really very cool. So, I think it's really wonderful that sort of 40 years on, Ernie Hudson is directly embracing and making sure that the character of Winston is cared for. Like, the reality is that this is an actor who at certain points in the 1980s felt maligned by this franchise and by the studio in terms of how his character and his contributions were considered. And after all of that, he was the person who went out to conventions and essentially met up with tons of people. And probably more of us who are Ghostbusters fans have met Ernie Hudson than any other person who ever was, a principal Ghostbuster in a Ghostbusters film. That title for some period might have been held by Dan Aykroyd when he was doing lots of Crystal Head signings, but it certainly isn't today. But the person who lived that convention lifestyle for many years and met lots of fans was Ernie Hudson, and he was at all times sort of upholding the mantle of, Winston. And so to sort of see him achieve this success, obviously for the character within the narrative is awesome, but to sort of see like the growth that Ernie Hudson has had about this character and to be able to embrace it and talk about its positive values, or rather his positive values, what its impact is on kids, and to feel fulfilled by that as he talks about it is really awesome. Like, it's really cool to see that sort of arc in real life of, sort of Ernie Hudson's relationship with Ghostbusters. And listening to that in this interview is really, really cool, and it's worth checking out. One final thing he touches on that you can take a look at as well is that he is asked about Rick Moranis and whether he had been, sought out to be in the movie. And he went on to explain that Rick Moranis is an important part of the success of all this, and that he doesn't understand why Rick Moranis doesn't want to be part of it. He comments that he hasn't had a personal conversation with him, but that he knows that before Ivan Reitman passed away, he had spent a lot of time trying to convince Moranis to come on board. And he goes on to say that he knows that they offered Moranis more money than they offered him, so he doesn't feel that this is a question of whether or not Moranis was well compensated as much as he thinks that, this is something that Rick Moranis just didn't want to do. And so he kind of closes off his comments here saying, not just in Ghostbusters, but I think he's an amazing talent. I would love to see him working, but obviously it was a personal choice. Maybe if they did a country western album or something, but I don't know. I'd love to see him back if there were any way possible, And I don't know if he meant like that the Ghostbusters were going to do a country western album, but I don't like country music, but the notion of Ernie Hudson suggesting that Rick Moranis will come back for a country western album, I like the idea that maybe the Ghostbusters do one, then Louis Tully comes back and it's Louis Tully's, Western hoedown, and it's all in character. It sounds like a terribly ridiculous idea, but it's now one that I really want ever since he said this. One other interview that took place with Ernie Hudson came from comicbook.com that you should go check out, and delves really deeply into what ghostbusting lore could look like moving forward and how Winston's story could play out if he were in the position to drive the narrative. And he kind of talks about the idea that within Frozen Empire, there's a research center that they're trying to figure out who these ghosts are. Are they all ghosts that should be busted? Do they all deserve to be trapped, etc.? And he delves into this story about his grandmother, saying, my grandmother, who believed in ghosts, she felt that ghosts can't move furniture, but they can move your emotions around. And when you start getting these thoughts about stuff, that's coming from some place, and maybe that's the influence. And if you can eliminate those bad ghosts, then maybe you break that cycle. We're treating people from a physical standpoint, but maybe there's something else going on supernatural that's influencing. So it's not just what happens in the ghost world, but how the ghost world is throwing off the physical world. We did a little bit of that in the second movie with the slime, where suddenly the whole town was out of control. Ghosts definitely affect our thoughts, our feelings, our suspicions, and the Bible talks about ghost spirits are like messengers. They bring these ideas to us and they feed us, and suddenly you become possessed with this idea of your girlfriend cheating or something. Where's that coming from? That's not something that you're necessarily doing, but you're allowing in. So I would love to see Winston trap this series of ghosts that people can't see, but we have the equipment. We know they're there, and suddenly a town is sort of freed up. Suddenly the mass murderer decides to no longer have interest in it. And I thought this was kind of fascinating that, like, there's this attempt here to sort of stitch together mental health and emotional health and the potentiality of hauntings together, which in a way dovetails a little bit with the way Kevin Mangold was talking about, you know, his motivations for Slimer and the idea that slime is made of emotions. And so arguably that means that Slimer is potentially the most emotional ghost we've seen on screen, right? But I find this fascinating that there's this deeper level conversation going on, or at least thinking going on amongst our principal actors, about what the future of ghost busting looks like. Not just like, will we make another movie, but what does the world look like? What does the narrative world look like moving forward? And what could be on the table, you know, as they begin to step away from this? And so will we see that play out? Like, will the next Ghostbusters movie be about how paranormal psychiatry and psychology becomes a thing? I don't know, but it's definitely a cool concept to start thinking about. And you should go check out more of that in that interview over at comicbook.com for sure. And one final piece of media released alongside the marketing push for Frozen Empire's digital release is yet another awesome installment from Adam Savage's Tested channel on YouTube. So if you haven't seen this already, I won't spoil what's in it for you, but it is very prop heavy. He goes and visits the folks working on their workbenches, like Gemma Goodridge, Ben Millen, and Richard Gray, and kind of takes a look at how different stunts and special effects things were achieved. Again, I don't want to spoil you and tell you what was in that because it's way better watched than it is explained, but you should go take a look at it for sure. So that kind of wraps up the stuff in terms of official Ghostbusters media releases this week, but we need to talk about merchandise for a few moments. And this week, things are a little light on merch. There's not a lot that's being released officially or licensed. And in fact, there's not a lot being released all that much at all this week, but I don't think that's that surprising because if we're going to see another merchandise push, it's probably going to be happening after the 40th. We have essentially about 3 weeks until we get to the 40th anniversary of Ghostbusters. And so if we're going to see a merchandise announcement, it's probably going to happen alongside that, sort of milestone moment. But it's worth pointing out that the Plasma Series Ecto-1 from Hasbro has been released. And this is the Ecto-1 that has been scaled to 1/18 size, or rather 3 3/4 inch O-ring figure size, because we know there are O-ring figures coming allegedly on Ghostbusters Day is when the pre-orders are going to launch for that. So if you are looking to pick up an Ecto-1 to add to your collection that is made by Hasbro and that will fit their next series of figures, knock yourself out. They're available now over on Hasbro Pulse. I believe the price is $59.99 and there's a limit of 3. I don't know why you're buying 3. I don't think you need to buy 3, but if you feel the limit, you got to max it out. Go get yourself 3. But for $59.99, you can pick up that car now. To be clear, that is a essentially redesign of the Plasma Series Afterlife Ecto-1. In this case, the gunner seat has been removed. The hardware has been swapped out on the roof. The paint matches the original 1984 car rather than the Frozen Empire car because it's celebrating the 40th anniversary of the franchise. And of course, the O-ring figures are going to be of the 4 original Ghostbusters. Does this mean we will get yet another Plasma Series Ecto-1 later on for Frozen Empire and maybe 4 O-ring figures from Frozen Empire? Who knows? I don't know. Probably not. But it's cool if it's something you're into. I will admit that I'm sort of doing a wait and see on this. I want to see the O-ring figures before I pull the trigger on another Ecto-1. Not because it isn't a cool product, but because the space here is limited. And I literally had to remove 2 Ecto-1s from the rotation last week because there's no more room at the end. And I'm going to have to consider where those are going to go. But they're definitely cool. Like the Ecto-1 they've put out is pretty cool and comes with an additional proton pack gurney that slides into the back of the car. So while it doesn't come with the RC trap and doesn't have a gunner seat like the last Ecto one they put out, this one comes with a gurney, and the proton packs from the O-ring figures will slot right into it. So feel free to go check that out for $59.99 over at HasbroPulse.com for sure. And the other officially licensed piece of merchandise that's out this week is a glow-in-the-dark Slimer sweater that's going to be available soon from HalloweenCostumes.com. It's apparently called the Slimy Salutation Sweater. It not only glows in the dark, but also has an animated version of Slimer on the front of it and lots of slime decor, as well as a glow-in-the-dark set of Ghostbusters patches on each of the elbows, which is kind of fun. You can grab this soon from HalloweenCostumes.com. It is not yet available, but you can go take a look at the item page over on Halloween Costumes for $49.99. It'll be coming out on October 15th, and you'll hopefully have that in time for Halloween or Christmas. Although, to be fair, it is just like a green sweater with lots of slime decor and sort of black cuffs and riffs. So you really could probably wear this anytime that wasn't the dead heat of summer. And don't forget that this also goes right alongside the Stay Puft sweater that we talked about from HalloweenCostumes.com last week. So a few different items still coming from Halloween Costumes. They continue to kill it and put lots of cool stuff out. And I imagine as we get closer to Halloween, there will be even more stuff to take a look at from them. So that's pretty cool. And in sort of unofficially licensed or fan-produced merchandise, I want to talk for a few minutes about things that are going on over at Buffalo Ghostbusters. You know that they are working on putting together their 40th anniversary event over at Hook and Ladder 8 in NYC for June 8th. And I'm hoping that folks are going to come out to that if they're available, because I'm hopefully going to be there, which is awesome, which is not the only reason to go, obviously. There's tons of cool stuff going on. There's like 5 different Ecto ones that are going to be there. And this year they're all Cadillacs, which is crazy. It's like a fleet of classic Cadillacs that are going to be on hand for the movie, or for the movie's celebration. And of course, there's also going to be things we've talked about before, like t-shirts and patches that are benefiting the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. One thing that I think I neglected to mention is that the playing card decks that were announced, which franchises were participating, happened right here on Extraplasm many months ago. I don't think I told you all that those went on sale. They are available now for $15 a piece. And you can get those from over at BuffaloGhostbusters.com. But the other thing that they've announced is that they will be auctioning off and raffling several Spengler's Spirit Funko Pops from Ghostbusters Afterlife that were signed by cast member and Dirt Farmer performer Bob Gunton. And so those are going to be auctioned off, and more details are to follow on those. But they're going to be available via betterworld.org, and you can take a look at them now over on the Buffalo Ghostbusters Facebook page, as they posted some photos of the items they're going to be auctioning off or raffling off. But this is a pretty cool thing. Like, this is all stuff that continues to benefit the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. All of this great stuff, t-shirts, patches, these new pops that they're offering that are going to be available for folks to try and win. All of this stuff benefits a great cause that's going to help out firefighters, and that supports firefighters who came through 9/11, etc. You can find out more information about all of this over at the Buffalo Ghostbusters link tree. It's accessible at www.buffaloghostbusters.com. And beyond what Buffalo has on offer to benefit firefighters over in New York City, our friends over at TCU Collectibles and the Containment Unit Autograph Collecting Group on Facebook have announced a few different signing opportunities that are now open, with one of them literally opening just moments before I finished up recording this section of the podcast, to be real. And so our friends over at TCU have announced that William Atherton has an open signing. It's their second exclusive private signing with him that'll be closing on June 21st. This is an opportunity to get 8x10s, to get posters, etc., all signed by William Atherton, who of course played Mayor Walter Peck in the most recent movie. You can get any item signed for $65. If you'd like to add his character name, it's an additional $20. And there are charges for photo printing for 8x10s, 11x14s, or 12x18s if you're asking them to print things. They also have a few other items that are available, like the official movie posters that you can get signed, or you can get a Vote Peck 3-inch button that is like from Peck's electoral campaign that they made, or ray gun cards. If you want to order those, you can certainly reach out to them at slimesignatures@gmail.com. And the other big announcement, which is a first-time signing from a visual effects legend, Stuart Ziff, who worked on all of the original Star Wars films, Jurassic Park, Amityville 3D, Ghostbusters, and many, many more things, is going to be doing his very first private signing. Again, that is also going to be due on June 21st. The price there is $60 per autograph, with similar prices on photograph printing. and what have you, and ray gun cards. So if you want to pre-order these, if you want to get involved, you have until June 21st to make payments. Although if you're ordering for Ziff, you're going to be emailing ghostbustersautographs@gmail.com rather than slimedsignatures@gmail.com. If you're wondering how this works, it's because Matt and Tom both handle things via email, and one of them, I believe, checks one email box and one of them checks the other while coordinating with folks. I might be wrong about that. Maybe I'll have to issue a correction, but either way, I imagine if you email either of those addresses, you'll get pointed in the right direction. And you could, of course, go find more information from TCU Collectibles in order to figure out your order. This is something where I will be honest with you. If you want to get these autographs, get them now. Our actors are not getting any more accessible over time as they sort of move towards retirement. The same thing goes with our behind the scenes folks. And Stuart Ziff had never really been somebody who's done autographs before. He also has an outstanding episode on the Containment Unit podcast that if you have never heard, you should go and listen to. It will tell you why you want his autograph if you don't know who he is. For real, you will understand why Stuart Ziff is so instrumental in terms of the success of Ghostbusters in terms of production and things. And one final thing I want to tell you to take a look at this week. This is the part of the podcast where I tell you to take a look at something fun and low key. Is if you haven't seen it already, there's a fan produced comic called Ghostbusters Ectosysm that has now had its second issue released. This is a project of artist Nick Ross that I've neglected to mention in a previous episode. So my apologies to Nick on that. This is a pretty cool story imagining another Ghostbusters movie that would have followed Ghostbusters 2 and that would have been set in the 1990s. And it's told through what the artist describes as a pastiche of oil painting and digital art. The entire story is set to be told over 9 issues and will weigh in at a whopping 300 digital pages of highly detailed illustrations and paintings. You can take a look at this project by going to Instagram.com/NickRoss138 and see preview images of the pages, or you can click the link in Nick's bio to download high-res PDFs from MediaFire. If you're struggling to find this, you can also find it on Ghostbusters News, where Jason Fitzsimmons has been covering it for a while, as far back as a poster image before this even came out. So this is really cool. Whether you're into comic books or whether you're into graphic novels, I think this is a really neat thing that is a good story that's essentially telling a story about a movie that could have existed after Ghostbusters 2 and potentially between it and the video game. That's kind of fun and that actually leans into what would have happened if Steve Buscemi had been cast into roles, or Alicia Silverstone, somebody who, all these actors who were people who were mainstays in the 90s are suddenly brought into this comic book in terms of the art style and stuff. And it's kind of fun to imagine. So it's worth taking a look at. So that about wraps up Ghostbusters headlines for this week. Let's go now to my conversation with Jason Fitzsimmons and Tony Taylor as we unpack some of the stuff from the digital release of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire and have a pretty fun conversation. Joining me on Extraplasm Podcast, 2 of my favorite folks who ever appear on the podcast, 2 friends of the podcast, and 2 frequent contributors and collaborators, Jason Fitzsimmons of Ghostbusters News and Tony Taylor, Mr. Tony Taylor Toys of Fantazm Toys. It's so great to have you both here. Jason, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm quite happy to be back. I mean, it's been a while. You've been talking to a lot of bigger names over the last few weeks, so I thought maybe this show may have hit maybe too much of a big time to have me on it. So I'm grateful that you've invited me back for this very big, very important episode. We're talking about deleted extended scenes, the digital release. I'm pumped.
Yeah, I am too. And part of it is that you and I went and talked to a bunch of celebrities together, and then I was like, I should just keep doing that.
Yeah.
So I just moved down a chain. I went down the cast list of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire and was like, who will talk to me? I'm kidding. But
no, what I love is not only did you continue doing that, but you kicked me to the side. So I love that aspect of it.
I did in no way kicked you to the side. That's why you're here.
I would like to remind everybody that I'm here when there's no buddy that worked on Frozen Empire. So I'm just saying. Maybe I embarrassed him on the red carpet. I don't know the circumstance. I don't know how his how his mind works. But I'm excited to be here because I feel like I'm joined by. And I don't mean to steal your thunder and take control of the show right here, but I'm joined by the one, the only Tony Taylor Toys, Fantazm Toys. Tony, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for the introduction, Jason. I thought Jim lost my number because it's been a while since I've been on here. But thanks for the introduction and taking over, Jason. You definitely didn't embarrass me or do
never
or do me any wrong or anything like that.
I always think of you, Tony.
But in all seriousness, the last few episodes have been I mean, really great to hear from AC and Slimer. You had Slimer on the podcast, and yeah, you've been killing it, Jim. It's been awesome. But I've been enjoying all the episodes.
Now that you've both reduced me to tears and reminded me why I enjoy having you here, as you both maliciously mock me in the process of starting the podcast, and apparently Mr. News is just going to run things now. I appreciate that. It has been really cool to have several different folks on the show, who've kind of contributed to Ghostbusters Frozen Empire in different ways, whether it was AC as a stunt performer, whether it was Kevin as, performer as Slimer, whether it was Luke Whitelock in terms of building the set. But to be real, I'm so glad the two of you are here because you're two of my favorite people to talk to. So thank you for coming on Extraplasm so we can dig into kind of a final piece of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. We both talked about, or all three of us talked about the movie together and our multiple watchings of it. And now the digital release is out. And so we've got an opportunity to kind of dig into some bonus features, some deleted scenes, some cool stuff. I'm excited we're going to get into this stuff because I think that there's a whole bunch of different things we may still not have seen from this movie. I think it's cool that we're going to probably unpack and talk about 6 deleted scenes, although I imagine there's probably 65 more somewhere because there's, I think, a lot more of this film that we haven't seen yet. But it's always interesting to sort of see how a movie comes together, what got left on the cutting room floor, and then, sort of how we feel about what didn't show up. I mean, I think there's some pretty pivotal scenes in Ghostbusters that I don't know about you all, but think about the fact that, the Janine Lucky coin scene that we all ended up getting in the end, as a sort of a afterlife oriented piece of content was originally a deleted scene from the original movie. And so it still has so much value and it makes you wonder how these might show up again later. So shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
Okay. I think we all access this via Amazon. We had a discussion about that as a common point before we started recording. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Got it on Amazon.
So I think that means that all three of us have also failed to be able to find the director's commentary that we won't be commenting on.
Figure that out.
We've watched a lot of featurettes, but I was kind of we got together and I was like, have you seen this? No, nobody can find it. Okay, cool. So if anybody knows what platform I actually need to go, I guess now buy the movie on again so I can listen to the director's commentary, let me know in the, the comments or in the feedback or via email. But let's dig into deleted scenes first, I guess. For you all, coming out of the 6 deleted scenes that were offered out of this digital download, what was your take? Was there a particular deleted scene that you thought was really good that you wish we still got? Or did you feel like they did a good job of kind of cutting and trimming out stuff that we didn't need? What was your overall take at first?
I felt like pretty much all of it could almost have been left in the movie, aside from what is it, the Ghost Chopper one where Patton's character is actually in the firehouse, which would require some explaining and some other stuff to, figure all that out. But all of it felt like it could have easily have been in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Gil in some interviews, he was talking about how a lot of scenes were kind of, well, not a lot, a couple really good scenes he was talking about that were removed leading up to the big boss battle, the big fight with Garaka. Just mainly due to pacing and everything. And to me, I know nothing about filmmaking whatsoever, but for the most part, I feel like these could have been easily slid in there and they really wouldn't have affected things too much. In fact, I feel like to some degree, it would have given these circumstances a little bit more time to build and add that little extra layer of padding.
I felt similarly. I kind of felt like looking at these 6 scenes, there's probably one that I'm kind of okay, you could be, I'm I don't think that the Lars shitloads of weapons line is all that important to me, if that makes sense. It's just I didn't feel yeah, we needed that in the movie. It makes a difference. But I feel some of the other scenes that are in there added some depth and some humor in ways that I was surprised by. In particular, Tony, you talked about this idea that you'd have to reconfigure how Patton is in the firehouse, make an explanation of why he was there. And I imagine in some original draft that they shot, there is that exposition, he must follow them back to the firehouse after they're at the library and he almost gets eaten by a giant statue rather than just disappear from the picture for the rest of the movie. But I liked that scene because there were good jokes in it. It made me laugh. And I was oh, there's 2 or 3 good funny jokes in here that just made me laugh that I wished were in the movie,
a lot of characters get their own little moments. Janine has some fun stuff to say. You get a lot of fun dialogue out of Ray, and you get an interaction between Kumail's character and Patton's character, and there was a lot. And the Ghost Chopper, you get all that, and you get Dan Aykroyd's reaction to thinking, imagining a helicopter with the Ghostbuster logo on the side. you get his face there. That's worth it for that whole scene anyhow.
It feels kind of important too, because I think in particular, I feel that Annie Potts, Janine, and Finn Wolfhard, Trevor, they didn't really have, like, I wish there was more actual, like, valuable scenes of those characters in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And even though, like, the scene was obviously cut, didn't really mean all that much. What is explained, obviously, is explained in another scene in the movie that actually made the cut. But I just feel like those two, in addition to Dan Aykroyd, in addition to Patton, they just shine in this. Like, it's so well done. And to actually have, me watching it, there was 3 moments, I think you actually just said the same thing, that made me laugh. And to have that in like a 2.5 minute long clip in a Ghostbusters film in 2024, I feel like it succeeded.
Yeah.
And it's just a shame just to have that on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, and it's sort of like a situation where I see repeatedly, for whatever reason, that Annie Potts ends up being a character, Janine ends up being a character who gets cut around. And we saw that with Afterlife too, that there was an entire arc for Janine, that we're pretty sure existed out there that we never got to see. And it's kind of awkward that we get to see this character who we all find very beloved, who we really love her acerbic wit, and it's kind of funny. Like in the featurettes, they talk about how she's the queen of the firehouse. And that's kind of her role. Yet we often see her scenes getting cut, because I really did feel like the one-liners and the sort of jokes that she has in that, scene really are nice little stingers, but they also give you the sense that like Janine still has this sense of acerbic wit, that like the only other sort of moment we get of that in the movie is when she's going up the stairs and she says to Gary, yeah, Gary, super secret ghost busting stuff. Like, other than that, we don't really get another like great Janine moment, and it's kind of funny to me because like in the comic book, that elements of her character is kind of maintained. Like she gives them a smoothie recipe, apparently it's terrible, and they think she made them drink slime or something, like in the most recent issue, right? Like, and it's kind of like sad to see Janine get lost on the cutting room floor in a way, because yeah, she's there. Yeah, she gets the suit up and that's awesome at the end of the movie. But like, I like these moments where she kind of fills in the blanks a little bit about what happened between the 80s and today, et cetera, that kind of get lost, So I don't know. I would have liked to see more Annie Potts. Maybe we'll someday get like the super extended cut of all Ghostbusters movie in which all Annie Potts scenes are integrated back into the movies. That would be great. So
it feels like how Annie Potts and Janine's character did have like a whole nother storyline in Afterlife, and it kind of feels like that was cut. It feels like Trevor's more like the victim in this one, with his story getting kind of more focused on and a little more attention. It feels like with the rooftop scene cut, it feels like that was like a development of his storyline, trying to more of like him talking about who he is and the whole equation of Ghostbusters. And also there's another scene where he actually looks at the Time magazine that gets cut out. It feels like Trevor's character kind of took a lot of the chops when it came to the editing in this one.
How did you feel about the Time magazine cut? Because like to me, I went, what would that have taken? 5 seconds? Like, what did that save?
Exactly. Yeah. Could have definitely easily been left in the movie. It feels like there's a lot, but it feels like this is just the tip of the iceberg of what was actually cut too. It feels like there's a lot more.
Yeah, I mean,
that was on the floor.
It was something where, I think for a lot of people, if they've watched the movie only one time, it's not really as noticeable, but on repeat viewings, you definitely get the sense of there are scenes that just feel like they go longer, or they should go longer, or you have seen them in trailers, audio bits, what have you there. And even just like hearing before the film came out, Dan Aykroyd talking about his character being, bitter or, being resentful and stuff like this, and not really seeing that. It just seems like, again, there's just so much stuff that just did not make the cut in the film. And there's one moment that I kind of feel like is a bit of a travesty in the respects of, you get this great scene earlier in the film with Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson, and they're arguing like at the police station and everything. Such a great moment. And then later on at the firehouse, when they're kind of getting ready for Garaka to come, Ernie, he comes walking, Winston, he comes walking over to Ray, and, they pass off the Neutrino wand, and there's just like this nod. And that's it. And there's more there. There's a discussion there of Ray being back in action and back, he's a Ghostbuster again. And it got pulled from us. And maybe that is one of those things where, that maybe there was something there that it just dragged on way too long and it took the focus away from the family dynamic and the Garaka threat and everything. Okay, fine. But I want to see it. And I know Sony will probably do a slow drip in terms of special editions, 40th anniversary editions, 45th anniversary editions, new content, new deleted scenes found. I just really want to see it all now. And I mean, we're still waiting on stuff when it came to Afterlife, like that Janine stuff, Paul Rudd acting like a dog. There's so much stuff that we have just not seen.
I think that there's very likely a ton of stuff we haven't seen. And that to me is why I think it's so weird that they cut like 5 seconds of Time magazine. Like it's such I made me wonder, like, was there a rights problem? Like, did somebody say, no, you can't use, like, was somebody over at like, whoever owns Time magazine, which I guess is, who's that now? Time Warner, CNN? I don't even know. Somebody owns it and it's not Sony. And it made me wonder, like, did someone not give their permission for this? Was it going to cost too much after they shot it? Like, what was the deal? Because it doesn't take anything away from the story to leave that in there, right? Like, even if you didn't pay off the Finn arc, or sort of the Trevor arc of like, Trevor doesn't know who he is, having him stop and look at that picture of the 4 original Ghostbusters, I believe would have been the only moment in that movie where all 4 Ghostbusters were actually referenced, like directly as characters in a still moment. And to me, it's almost like, if you think about the trailer for Afterlife, everybody was waiting for that moment where we were going to see that black and white photo of the 4 guys in front of the firehouse that was in the trailer. And then, like, it was in the background somewhere, but there was never like a moment where they stopped and focused on it. So everybody was like, why didn't it show up? And to me, it was kind of like the same thing where I was like, why didn't we get this moment that was just like, hey, just to remind you, these are like the legacy of these 4 guys. And it only takes 5 seconds, and it would have had like some emotional weight that kind of like reminded you that they were upholding this legacy at the beginning of the film. But I mean, maybe somebody felt it wasn't balanced at an emotional level. It swung you from like, hey, he's going up in the attic after joking around with mom, to, hey, now he's being remorseful, to, hey, now he's going to go get slimed. Like, that the emotional beats didn't work all together. But to me, it was a scene where I went, I don't understand why this hurts the movie to keep it in there.
Yeah, when I did a breakdown for the Ghostbusters News YouTube channel, I kind of mentioned that, where I'm thinking it was likely just that stark shift in tone of going from, that serious, I miss my grandfather, don't really know my grandfather, what's my place in this world, what's my place as a Ghostbuster, or even in this family, to then animated style hijinks with Slimer, like immediately then and there. So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. By the same token, I think that like grief and loss and those kinds of things do have these very like sporadic moments. And so, and maybe I'm a little close to that at the moment. I don't know. But like, there are these moments of like sort of sporadicness that happen where you're suddenly reminded of something. And then the next thing that happens is a series of pots fall over and you laugh about it. And it's just, I don't know. To me, I didn't feel like it pulled me out of that moment or that tone so much that it was worth cutting. And I'm not the director, so I guess that's Gil's decision. But like, to me, I would have left that in there because it just would have, even if it oscillated you back and forth a little bit, it would have kind of reminded you that like, here's this kid who's like finding his grandfather's stuff and heading up in the attic and uncovering all this stuff. And then a moment later, like he's going to uncover something else that's 40 years old and it's Slimer, So I don't know. I think I would have been okay with it in there.
Do you feel like maybe it could be a thing too, where it would have had more effect if it was Phoebe finding it rather than Trevor? Just because with Phoebe in this one here, I mean, in the first film, she came off a very smart character, which I mean, she is obviously. And then going into this one, she is, she has Ghostbusters taken away from her. She's also got the teenage angst that pretty much any teenager would have. And then moving to New York City, there's a lot going on with her character. Do you think that it would have packed more of a punch for her to be reminded of the grandfather, finding something similar, Time magazine, something along those lines? Would that have been better than Trevor?
Maybe.
I think it works for both. actually. It would have hit harder, I guess, maybe a little bit if Phoebe found it, having kind of just experienced all those feelings with her through Afterlife. It is kind of like the first real sentimental thing you kind of see Trevor's character do, besides being more comic relief and kind of joking around and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think you're right. Maybe it would fit better with Phoebe than him, but still, I think it still worked. It still belonged in the final cut. I
think that this is what I would say about it. I don't think I want the arc. And maybe that sounds like messed up, but like I wanted that moment when I saw it. I was like, oh, this would have been a nice like callback moment. And I guess that's really more for me than it is for the character. Cause I'm like, oh yes, the 4 guys in that cool photo. And like, wow, look, there's the 4 of them together and there's nostalgia to that. But like, I'll be honest. One of the scenes I would cut is rooftop consolation. Like I didn't find it to be compelling. I didn't find it to be like something that would have resolved an arc well. Like, who am I out of the blue? Sort of like not really throughout the rest of the movie. Like, who am I anyway? Mm-hmm. Followed by like, well, you know, you're going to figure it out. And also we're all about to die. And it's like, okay, cool. Like kind of fun, but also doesn't really advance the story in any way, you know? So in a way, I kind of just wish I got, and maybe that's the way I put it is like, we get so many Easter eggs in Ghostbusters movies at this point between Afterlife and Frozen Empire that this is one that I would have liked to have seen stay in. And we can live without it. It doesn't break the movie, but when I saw it, I don't know, just emotionally, I went, oh, I wish that was there. It just would have just added something, a little bit of weight to that scene, you know, and then you could flip it. You could add that little bit of weight. He goes upstairs. He comes from talking to mom and goofing around. He encounters sort of the family heirlooms that are upstairs and the junk that's upstairs. And then he encounters a ghost, you know, and I don't know, but maybe I'm beating it to death.
Well, a couple months ago on this podcast, I was all like, hey, look at all these trailers. I'm so excited for them to develop the Lucky character, and we're going to see so much more of her in Frozen Empire. Boy, was I wrong.
And that is kind of true. Even, you know, looking at these deleted scenes and the featurettes, I don't really get a sense of like what Lucky was doing there other than, well, Lucky was expanding horizons and happened to get an internship opportunity because of having been interacted with the cross rip or an event that happened in Somerville. Okay, cool. But this is fine. And I have no dislike to the character. And I just wish that, like you, that there was more development of that character across the movie, you know, and it kind of surprised me that in some ways it seems like what Lucky's character was there to do in maybe some draft of the film was more to facilitate a Trevor arc, if that makes sense, you know, to sort of be the person who's going to talk to Trevor and talk through some things and whatnot. And then certainly is there to kind of facilitate a Phoebe arc in the final movie, right? That like, she's got to sort of show up, or they've got to sort of show up and save the day. I think you're right. It would have been nice to learn a little more about what Lucky's doing in that lab and what motivates that, you know,
the fact that she came to New York to work in that lab, she totally friend zoned Trevor. Totally friend zone.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Without question. I mean, that's just like,
I'm kind of curious when it comes to the Back in Town comic series, how they're going to actually like talk about that, because he's conversing with Lucky like in that series, like via text and everything.
Right.
So I'm really curious about, again, how they're going to adapt that, because it's in canon with Frozen Empire.
Yes. And like in that comic book, when he's like, when she doesn't answer him, like his mom is consoling him, saying things like, she's probably in class. Right, or something along those lines. And instead, like, I mean, to be fair, there's like there's a few year gap between the two things, right? They don't necessarily, Back in Town doesn't run directly up until Frozen Empire, as like David Boer talked about when he was on. But like, for sure, like there's some sort of developmental thing going on in Lucky's life that's going to connect Lucky to this research lab. And Trevor eventually walks in and goes like, oh, you're here. You told me you had an internship, but you didn't happen to say where. Turns out it's with my family's business. Got it. You know, so there has to be some level of awkward distance or friend zoning there, you know, that like kind of, then I feel in some ways like that deleted scene confirms that is like a friend zoning relationship. They are not in a, you know, he was interested in her for certainly in the afterlife, but that is not the outcome of their relationship, you know, in that moment. So I don't know. I didn't feel it was that compelling of a scene, and I was happy to let it go, you know, whereas like maybe, and that's what's weird is like, I want 5 seconds of Time magazine, but You could kill the rest of Trevor's arc, and I'm okay with it. Like,
She wasn't allowed to talk to him because she was sworn to secrecy with all the super top secret Ghostbusters stuff.
that's right. That's right. I mean, I would have liked an explanation for that. I would have liked them to be like, why didn't you tell us this? And then Winston explains why. That would have been something. It would have been nice to see.
He kind of does in the movie. Because I just recently watched it. Obviously, having got it on Amazon recently, but he said he didn't want to tell them until it was ready, and he pretty much says now it's ready.
Gotcha.
The containment unit and the whole lab and stuff. It's the only line that kind of in the whole movie that kind of explains why they don't know about the lab and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's just weird as to why he doesn't want them to know until it's ready. He's like, don't plan, just have it sprung on you that.
Yeah, it still doesn't make any sense really, but that.
Yeah, that would have been.
They're not going back into business in this one, okay? Like, the Ghostbusters aren't down on their luck at the beginning this time around. This is like the closest we have of them getting like reestablished and, back in the ghostbusting field.
Do you think it's just Winston like completely having like the power now? He's like, once I was the employee, now I am the boss. He's like, before in 1987, no one would have told me why we were doing what we were doing. These three guys would have been like, get in the car, we're all going someplace. These readings say stuff, but now I'm in charge. I get to keep things secret from other people. Like, the other scene I thought was kind of funny to see cut, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, is this Venkman and Paul Rudd scene, like the Venkman and Gary scene in the containment unit where he says, I'm a doctor, is I think the title of the scene. And part of me likes this scene a lot because I think it is a really just true scene about Venkman. Like but on the other hand, I can see why it was cut because it's really a true scene about Venkman.
I like more Bill Murray. And more Bill Murray specifically as Peter Venkman. Yes, please. Like, yes, as much as I can get at this point. Paul Rudd seems a little weird in this scene to me. Like his acting seems a little off. Like I don't know. He kind of throws me out of it. But the Bill Murray stuff, I'm fine with. Yes, please.
Yeah. I mean, especially scenes with Bill Murray and Paul Rudd. I mean, despite the fact that Rudd doesn't really have too much to kind of go on here aside from breaking apart a CGI icicle, which is not actually CGI yet.
CGI lacking.
Exactly. But yeah, the fact that we didn't really get a lot of Bill Murray and Paul Rudd like dialogue between the two, I would have liked to have seen this make it, but at the same time too, it doesn't do anything in the favor of Peter Venkman, as in like you feeling like he's a hero.
No, it's like literally like for whatever reason, it's like it's a moment where Venkman confirms that everything that you could have ever said about Venkman is like, oh, he was just kind of a guy who was just trying to score with women, and he just talked out of the side of his mouth, and he's like, I mean, it worked for me, and you're like, yeah, that doesn't really benefit the character necessarily. I mean, even if it's kind of true, and times they've changed, whatever, but like it just kind of was a weird thing where I went, I like this scene because it is kind of the thing what Venkman would say probably if you gave him the opportunity. By the same token, it doesn't really help like in terms of storytelling. So I can see why it was cut, but I have mixed feelings about like, do I want to see more of like that version of Peter Venkman who's just like, hey, I'm an older guy now. I did things in my 40s, in my 30s, in my 20s. And that's how my life was. Like, just call it fate, call it luck, call it karma. And then he moves on. It's weird.
It does make his appearance at the end though a lot more impactful. Like that's the thing I feel like too, is like when he shows up there and he drinks his little schnapps and everything, already wearing a flight suit, which I don't know. But I just feel like, it does make it a little more impactful not to kind of have that big gap where he's not seen. And to be honest, I didn't really notice he was off camera like for that long in the movie.
It feels like that was supposed to be like right before his first scene where you see Dr. Venkman on the door and him and Kumal are having their scene with the throwing pens. It feels like the page he gets is to go down to the research lab for the experiment with him. So it does make that scene better. Like that's his big intro. You see his name on the door and you're like, oh, great, here he comes. So it probably helps with that. But overall, it's just cool to hear Bill Murray as Peter Venkman say what Ray would do, what Egon would do, what's he call
Z.
Winston, Big Z, what Big Z. Like it's just cool to hear him, just be in character, be Peter Venkman. So
to all my fellow Canadians that are listening right now, big ups to Zellers. It was like the Canadian Walmart. They had a dine-in area, and they used to sell Big Z burgers. So,
oh, nice.
They were a Canadian staple. They were just like they're as big as like maple syrup and beavers up here.
Those two things go hand in hand.
Well, we're gonna need to go back and like use the Mandela effect to bring in some big Z burgers that are got Ernie Hudson sponsorship on them or something. I don't know. So one of the things that I think is interesting about the way scenes got cut is that like some explanation of what was going on with Garaka's hunt for the Fire Master gets lost. Because I've joked about the idea that like he literally hunts for the Fire Master the same way that the Terminator would hunt for Sarah Connor. Like he's just like wandering
it's just
around,
missing the phone book scene.
Yeah, right. He's like shows up at the vape shop and he's like, "Are you the Fire Master?" Right? Like he could just be showing up like, "Are you Sarah Connor?" And so like this idea that like there's this news report about him essentially going around the neighborhood, like, and they're like, he's a 10-foot tall man in a really dark cloak, and he's walking around just asking people if they're the Fire Master. Like, it's a kind of a stupid scene if you think about it. Like
it's a little corny,
like super corny.
The news report in that scene's a little corny. Yeah, it's just missing the scene. There's probably another cut scene where there's an old phone booth and it freezes over and Garaka goes in there and you see the giant nails going through the phone book for under F for Fire Master.
Every time he tries to turn the page, like the phone book pages are just ripping.
It just freezes and shatters.
Yeah. They just like turn to ice and they rip out. He's like, shit. Like he just gets mad. So by the time he finds the Fire Master, he's totally infuriated because he's had to go through this. And he had to find a phone booth, like, because that still exists apparently in 2024 with a phone book inside of it, right? Like, I mean, to be real, like the Terminator actually has more resources on hand probably than Garaka in finding its target, because at least the Terminator had phone books. Like Garaka's got to find the internet and learn how to use it just to look up addresses. Like, but it is kind of weird then, like, who do you think directed Garaka to the vape shop? Like,
he probably did ask for directions. Where's the Fire Master? And they probably pointed him. Hey, it's over there, in the corner, or whatever and whatever.
And like, but think about like, how did this news report come together? Like, let's just unpack this for a second, right? Like, I realize it's a minute-long clip, and now I'm gonna want to spend like 20 minutes talking about it because it's ridiculous. But like, what is the news story there? Like, what attracted the news? Like, did the cops get called? And they were like, we had a 10-car response for a 10-foot tall man that was asking, have you seen the Fire Master? Right? Like, and so, like, Spectrum News sent out a van because they were like, there's a really tall guy asking for a weird name. Like,
well, with everything going on, too, because they just had a heat wave, right? And like in that scene, you're seeing the wind pick up, you're seeing the temperature change. And then right afterward, that's when everything begins to freeze over. So there is obviously much bigger stories that they can cover right now at this very moment. But instead, 10-foot tall guy in a cloak looking for a Fire Master. I mean, if he was just killing people left and right, okay, I understand that. I get covering that. But this is just some tall dude.
Yeah, it's like the Wonder Wheel has frozen over, like spikes have come out of the ground, taxi cabs are like being thrust into the air, and Spectrum News is like, in other news, a really tall man is asking questions about who people are. You're like, wait, what? Like, who sent this news van out? And is this the alternate news? Like, okay, the happy moment news, like, oh, we went out into the street and we found people with a puppy that contrasts with there were 7 people shot today. Like, is this the lighter side? Like, turns out 10-foot tall people are now in Tribeca looking for, something called the Fire Master. It's just like, it's such a weird news story. I'm glad they cut it for that reason, because it like doesn't really fit alongside everything else that's going on. But I'm not gonna lie, the fact that it builds into my lore about Garaka looking for Sarah Connor, I really do like that part.
I mean, I get why they cut it. Like they're totally cutting out the threat level of Garaka dramatically. Just imagining him like rummaging through like apartment buildings and like either going up like elevators or like corridor, like kind of like lurched over, just kind of making his way through. So I can totally get why they cut it. At the same time, though, there is a bit of a nugget there in terms of them talking about like some of the other ghosts making their way to the firehouse, which makes me happy because I was overly like, one of my biggest criticisms randomly is so stupid and small, but like Pukey just showing up in the firehouse.
Right.
So the fact that they just kind of like drop that in there is like, okay, I get it. Even though they say that, they're Garaka's commanding them, controlling them. That makes sense already as to why kind of Pukey's there, but they don't really spell it out for you. This does, and I like that because I'm simple.
Well, Lucky also name drops
Phosphor.
Phosphor.
Yes.
Yeah. You never see
him, and there's also in the finale. There's kind of like a lot of missing stuff. It feels like where was Paul Rudd's character, because he comes running from downstairs, and there's also like clips that we've seen in either trailers or whatever, like them looking out the firehouse window with their packs on and Callie firing her pack out of the window and stuff. Like maybe there was actually a battle between like Callie and Gruberson battling Phosphor because Pukey gets his moment with Lars.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's a whole nother scene of Phosphor showing up at the firehouse. And
I thought the same thing, that like we kind of don't get, some of those named ghosts. They're talked about in the featurette, I think, too. Like, because there's a featurette that goes through and it says like, hey, these are each of the ghosts that are in this movie, and each different character talks about, or a different actor talks about each of those ghosts. And it was kind of interesting that like they had a ghost who had a name that we never really saw, like beyond maybe just like, an initial reveal inside the research lab. But the final thing I'll say about that scene was that I did think it was funny that Kumail's character, that Nadim, is sitting there saying like, maybe there's another fire master. And then it turns out there is. It's the vape shop, right? So it's like they all are like, there can't possibly be another fire master. But like it turns out that in fact the target does get found, or at least for a while Garaka thinks that they've taken out the fire master. That must have been a moment too. I want to see that moment from the movie. Like right after the vape shop scene when Garaka walks out and is like, yes, conquest, I have won. And then for whatever reason realizes like, no, wait, that wasn't the fire master. Like, so speaking of Pukey, one of the deleted scenes that gets featured here is a scene of Lars, essentially the aftermath of what we kind of got teased to us. And I thought it was weird that this got cut too, that like, we know he gets slimed because he goes upstairs and he talks to Pukey and he's like, you're not one of the mean ones. You're one of the little ones. And I'm like, half of me, like every time I watch the scene, I'm like, you're the sciencey researcher dude who knows a disc man can eat your hand. So why would you even think that this was a cute little friendly one? But that's fine. Mm-hmm. But like you obviously should be the dude who's like most aware that this is like the biggest potential threat. But we don't actually see him get slimed in the cut of the movie, right? Like we understand that it happens. There's a sound effect and kind of but we don't see him like as a result. And so this deleted scene is essentially just like him on his back, right? Like being slimed like Venkman from the first movie. And I don't really know why this was cut other than the fact that I couldn't see how you transitioned off of it. Like it was a cut by itself. It seemed like almost like, hey, here's a rough cut to him on the floor. And then like the deleted scene just ends. And I was like, okay, so how would you transition off of that to somewhere else? Like, where do you go in the next beat of the story? Like he's just on the floor and then we just leave him? Like, you know what I mean?
It would have been funny. It would have been great to see it when Garaka has everybody frozen and is like kind of right at the very end and is almost sucking Phoebe's soul out, like is almost winning, and you get that shot. You see everybody frozen. You see Lucky frozen. You see Grubison frozen. You see the OGs frozen. And then it should have just been the cut of Lars upstairs squiggling around in the slime. And then it cuts to the match getting lit.
I mean, I think that probably would have taken away from the dramatic moment, right? But like,
I'm laughing.
It's funny because like where else? I mean, I kind of get why it gets cut in a way because it's like, where else does it fit in that? You know, like it is kind of this funny beat.
It's awkward, but at the same time, though, it does add to his moment at the end when like he comes out of the firehouse and did we win?
Did we win?
Yes.
Yeah. Because you never really
like they threw it in there.
You never really get the sense that, you know, he is a bit disheveled. You know, he's taken back by the slime. And to me, this is it because he's pretty much on his back prone like a turtle. Like he cannot get up whatsoever. So for somebody who usually is at the top of his game and smart, you know, it totally throws him. So I think it really does add more to that, again, that scene where he comes out the firehouse. But again, here, I think a great idea. I love the idea of like seeing all the Ghostbusters frozen and then cutting to him. But maybe even a scene too where like maybe there was like an unfinished part where he's frozen and like he's actually frozen. And then when the fire kind of comes through, you see that he unthaws and then he starts kind of moving around and everything and jostling on the floor. I don't know.
Like the slime is frozen.
Yeah.
And then as a result, he's like in a puddle of it afterwards.
Exactly.
Yeah. It would have totally worked, right? Like, I mean, it also would have paid off the fact that like, you know, James Acaster had to go through the process of getting slimed for that scene. And there's
exactly maybe that's why it's even in here.
Like even in the featurette, they're like showing him like, look, he's going through the process and he's talking about it in one of the featurettes. They're like, yeah, this is everything we did, and I get to be slimed in this movie. And it's like, no, you don't. That ended up on the cutting room floor. Like, so it's kind of weird that like, you know, they made such a big deal out of it, even in thinking about the marketing of the movie and like the featurettes, the behind the scenes stuff that they're shooting alongside the same time they're shooting the movie. They're like, oh, these are things we want to highlight that are going to be, you know, key moments in the movie and how we did them. But in the end, it's something it doesn't even make it to the film. And you're like, okay, that kind of sucks. So I wish there had been a way to kind of put it back in some way, because it also would have been a great callback to literally to Venkman. Like, cause that is, it's the same kind of thing. It's Venkman on his back.
I feel so funky.
Right. Like, and so to sort of have that like 40-year later callback to somebody being slimed and on their back would have been kind of cool, because you get the one of Finn being slimed earlier on and spitting the slime out of his mouth, but like, he's not on his back. He's not knocked over in a proton pack. And the notion that like you can be knocked over by slime in a proton pack is already established in the first movie. So it was really kind of consistent to me in seeing that, you know, end result of like, oh, you got slimed and you got knocked over, sort of ass over tea kettle, and now you have to get up with this giant proton pack on your back that it has to be complicated and difficult, you know? So I don't know. It's short. It doesn't really hurt the film, I guess, but I did like go, I really wish we got it. Cause I mean, the Finn Wolfhard slamming is great, but you know, and to be fair, the other thing it could have potentially taken away from, right, is that whole sequence of interactions happening, like the big comedy moment in the middle of the scary stuff there is like the pizza and that moment with Slimer, right? Like that is without question. And like the run up to all the drama, that is the moment that kind of makes you stop in the middle of the escalating scary and laugh like so hard, and then go right back into, oh, it's like ramping up and things are getting really bad, you know? And so it makes me wonder if you had that scene in there, if it would have run people back and forth between funny and scary too many times, you know, but I kind of wish it was there.
Yeah. You also have the scene of Nadim coming down the pole.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of,
that's right.
There's another stop for the laughs kind of thing. So it might've been too much in such a high stakes situation, too much comedy, and it might've been too much. Yeah,
that's true. I didn't think of that. And that's very much like a pace changing moment. Right? Like the entire movie is happening very frenetically to that point. There's like people being held essentially at gunpoint, like upstairs in the kitchen. And then like they're all downstairs. You think the drama's about to hit. And all of a sudden here comes this guy sliding down the pole, squealing the whole way down. And then his entire bit afterwards is obviously a bunch of sort of slower, you know, dialogue driven comedy after all this action sequence. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense that if you oscillated back and forth between action and dialogue and comedy that way too many times, you probably upset the sequence a bit, you know, but I do wish we got to see it in the movie. It was kind of kind of sad that somebody worked that hard to get slimed only to have it get cut, you know?
Now, is that slime or is it vomit?
I think he vomits slime.
Yeah.
Maybe it's both.
I mean, the explanation in the featurette is that he's able to vomit more slime than he could possibly contain. That's kind of the way it's expressed out and explained. So, and also that he does it when he's frightened, right? Like, which is to me like that's kind of an element of Pukey I feel like we didn't get was what his motivation is in that moment. He just like kind of walks out of a room and just blah.
I also have a question though too about it. But when you first see Pukey in the lab, he's just Pukey and his eyes are just black. And then when he's seen in the firehouse, they're like glowing white. Is he like possessed by Garaka, like under Garaka's control? And that's in that part, and that's what makes him one of the big scary ones?
I don't know.
Or is it?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that.
The eyes are really bright, glowing white. I don't know if maybe it's a reflection of the flashlight and I'm just reading too into it, but kind of seems like maybe it's under Garaka's control.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of that. But that is fair. Like, Garaka can control ghosts. We know this. So it does, of course, make us wonder why Garaka can't control one ghost to just blow a match out and just be like, nope, we're not doing this.
Oh, that one too. Yeah.
What'd you think you were doing? Nuh-uh. Like, that's... It's a range issue. I've said this. You have to be within range of Garaka to be adequately controlled. It's like a ranged weapon. It's otherwise the Garaka could just be like, I undo everything at a narrative level. So that's my headcanon right now is that Garaka's powers are limited by range. But I could be wrong about that. Somebody can feel free to write in and be like, nope, you're wrong. Sorry. Garaka is limitless and super duper. And I'll just concede that to you because arguing about it will be exhausting. Well, I think we covered most of the deleted scenes that we've, had on this digital release. There are a couple cool featurettes we should talk about. In particular, I thought that the featurettes that kind of showed where Garaka came from and the making of the various ghosts was pretty cool. Anything that you all felt was particularly standout that you really liked about the featurettes?
Actually, the Garaka bit there, I mean, just seeing like that cloak and like the amount of time and effort they put into that thing, I mean, it was getting like Leatherface, like kind of vibes in terms of like layers upon layers. That was like really cool. And that's something that I know Gil, like in the featurette, he kind of mentioned like, oh, when you see this up close shot, yeah, it's in the movie, but you don't really see the detail that kind of goes into it. And I don't know, I thought that was really cool looking. And also just seeing Slimer, how they did him this time around, very much practical for the most part. And I love seeing, again, I mentioned it like podcast a month ago when we did the one post New York City premiere, the scene of Slimer grabbing the Cheetos is my all-time favorite shot of Slimer ever. And to see how they did that, to kind of like to look at like to find out, what's inside the hot dog. I liked it. It's a good
yeah.
bit. I think for me, the busted documentary about the ghost was certainly my favorite.
I think it's pretty cool too. And I think it's really neat because like when you get down to it, this is like the, potentially the only Slimer performance that's happened like live between actors on set. Like everybody else is blue screened. Right. So it's like some of that was done for this too, but like, the scenes that happened in the attic, Kevin Mangold talked about this when he was on the podcast, happened with him and Finn on set, together. So to kind of see how they built the suit in order to be able to do that, I thought was pretty neat because prior to that, everybody's work had kind of been done separately over, at ILM or somewhere else, figuring out how to make composite shots. So to see that all come together was pretty neat. I also thought it was really cool to see the library ghost puppet, like to kind of see it with the lights on in a way and to kind of like get a sense of what it looks like and feels like. It was pretty neat,
You don't only get to see that in that featurette, but you get to get a glimpse of the archival footage that they used for the movie of the library ghost too, which that was really cool to see that old footage and how they reused it. Pretty much anything that Aryan did, to see more of that was just fun to see. And you get to see a little bit of, I think it was Gil Gil's actual little concept sketches of like all the different mini puffed situations. and
Yeah.
that spinning thing in the lab, some drawings of that, and you get to see Phosphor as more of like a render, and like you get to see the entire thing and learn that it's pretty much just like half a body, just a torso. There's nothing below like the rib cage, which I think was really cool to see, and would like to have seen more of that in the movie.
Oh, he's so toyetic. Like,
And yeah, he's even cheaper to make now. You know, he's only half a
There's
half
no
a thing.
legs.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny.
And also, I think it's in there that the sewer dragon was officially inspired by the subway ghost, and they're not the same. Mr. Jim.
I'm sorry. Are you trying to call me out on something that I was suggesting the two things are the same thing? Because
Well, it doesn't necessarily make you wrong. I mean, it was totally inspired by it. So yeah, they're basically the same thing.
Just the bigger version of it. Like what it turns out that the subway ghost that we've known for years and, was offered by Mattel is just the baby version of that. Like apparently there are two things that died together and turned into the same thing. Okay. How's
a lot
that?
of dragons died down there.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever it is, something happened that when those two beings became ghosts, they turned into the same damn thing. Maybe they were brothers. Maybe they were clones. I don't know. But like, it was not an unreasonable assumption. Okay, I'm just gonna put that out there. My mindset was that the thing was smaller and then it had 40 years to grow. But like,
I like it.
To be fair, if that was true, then Slimer should be huge.
Yeah.
He's like that episode of the real Ghostbusters where he just gets like really big and then they have to figure out how to make him small again. But in the process, they turn him into a bunch of little tiny Slimers that are all like floating around, right? Like that would have been okay. Let's have that Ghostbusters movie. I'd watch that as a live action picture. Kevin Mangold would have a lot of work. But yeah, I thought that, I thought those making of featurettes were pretty cool. And I think it's really awesome that, our friend Troy Benjamin over at the Cross Trip got an opportunity to shoot the one about the score, which I think was pretty neat. And the thing I liked about these featurettes the most, honestly, is that each of them teaches you about something Gil Kennan did that had nothing to do with directing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's
he was a busy guy.
Right. Like he's like, I'm sketching the scenes for the mini puffs. Oh, now I'm overworking on the score and I'm going to add some of my own little things to it. Right? Just like he's so hands-on that he's kind of like involved in all these little departments and all these little pieces and contributing in a way that like leave his stamp on the picture. I thought was kind of fun and interesting to learn about. And it's almost like director Easter eggs, as much as we expect Easter eggs out of these movies at this point. So, I don't know. Anything else you thought about featurettes that was really cool?
Well, I'm just going to say, like, I feel like Dario's score for Frozen Empire, I mean, I know people can say whatever they want about the film. It's up for criticism quite a bit online. But I got to say, the score for Frozen Empire to me is like the best score out of all Ghostbusters. I mean, Elmer Bernstein, love him, love his stuff. But I would say, let me say, this is my favorite score since the original.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's a better score than the one from Ghostbusters 2. I'm not sure that I feel it's better than the one from Afterlife, just because I think that I don't know. The one from Afterlife is very nostalgic, and there's something about like I know exactly what my favorite like song off of that score is, and it's the song that plays behind Phoebe and Podcast in their friendship moment that's called Lab Partners. That basically feels like it's being played on an out of tune toy piano. It's got like that sort of like, it's the same song and the beats behind it. And the vibe of like what's happening. It's the Ghostbusters boom, 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 like theme music, but it feels like a little bit off, like in the sense that it feels old or it's been up in the attic or something for a while.
It's always kind of giving me like this old, like, Charlie Chaplin vibe. Like there's just something about it where it's just, this old ragtime style kind of thing going on with it. I agree. That's a great track, but I don't know. There's just some of the Dario stuff there. The first track they play there when it's kind of like that cutback, like to the early 1900s, and it's that original kind of song, like that flavor that but just kind of slightly altered just a little bit. But I really feel like he's been one, compared to like Afterlife score, he was at least able to do quite a bit more when it came to adding his own vibe to it, while still kind of keeping again, those are kind of original recipes from that original film.
Well, was it Peter Bernstein in that featurette who talks about the idea that that the Afterlife score kind of takes those beats and reuses them, whereas Dario's score is creating a new language of Ghostbusters audio, but kind of utilizing the original pieces as like the root of the language, right? And I like that idea. I like the way he sort of explained it that way, that it's like, yeah, the pieces are still in there and the nuts and bolts of sort of like little pieces of the music are in there, but they're not supposed to sort of take the precedence and be the only thing that's there. There's all this kind of new content. What I kind of wish about the score, not to get away from the featurette, is that I wish I walked away from the score feeling like there was an iconic thing that was new. Like for me, I know looking at Afterlife, the iconic song of the Afterlife score that the minute you play it, I know is from that movie, is the like big symphony strings piece that plays when Egon has his moment with the family. That like the sad tear-jerking song that makes you cry in that moment is like, for me, bonded with Afterlife. And the minute you would play it, I would know exactly what it's from. I think I would be more challenged to have that happen with Frozen Empire, where like I would go, oh, you played that. And I go, oh, that's from that scene in Frozen Empire. I just don't find them to be as memorable in that sense. And maybe that'll change with time as I watch the movie more. But it was really cool to sort of see how they took these pieces of the original score and used them to build something new, as opposed to kind of take the original score and make it sound ragtimey, older, etc. You know?
Yeah, I think the entire score is just another great addition into the Ghostbusters scores. Like each movie, you can't argue, has an amazing score, has an amazing soundtrack, and this is just another one keeping up with the rest of the installments in the franchise as far as scores go. But I think in that featurette, it was great to see him go back to the original like synthesizer and the I think it's called the water phone that has that. I can't explain the noise, but it's very metallic and scary, and you know it when you hear it. And it's really used. It really, when I watched the featurette and heard it saw them actually play it. It's real Ghostbusters. Like that noise is used so much in the animated series,
right?
And to actually see the physical instrument, and they had to pour water into it, and how it's actually played with a bowstring and all that. I think that was cool to see.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool thing. Like I didn't know how they made that noise, and I always like seeing
either.
You know, Peter Bernstein show up with his Yamaha.
Yeah.
It's for real. Like, I love it. They're like, hey, we need to get the authentic sound of the original movie. How do we do it? Well, we'll just call the musician who played it and ask him to bring the actual equipment. Okay, cool. Yeah. And he's still got it. It's so funny that like 40 years on, he's like, yep, I got my Yamaha synthesizer that everybody thought was groundbreaking in 1984. Let me bring it out so I can recreate the same sound and play the exact same notes to start off the film. It's really great, you know, but like, I really like think that part of what was cool about these featurettes is like, yeah, you get, you know, your different producers who come out, and you get, Jason and Gil talking at a camera, like sitting in chairs. But to me, that's like less exciting than seeing these like behind the scenes things that were happening in the moment. And I think we've all said this at certain points to each other, that like coming out of the premiere, especially, like Gil Kennan is a super nice person, right? And is just like super into what he's doing and so excited to be making a Ghostbusters movie. And like Jason, I don't know if you probably remember this when we talked to him, like the first thing he said to us was like, isn't this crazy? Like, he was just like, isn't this amazing? Like wild. And you get that sensation watching these featurettes, you know, like watching sort of the joy of them making this movie and him being very excited about it. And I don't know, in some ways, like I hope we get to see more of like the behind the scenes making of this movie, because everybody who worked on it talks about being on such a positive and like, you know, well-meaning and well-intentioned set, like that there was no drama and everybody was happy working on a thing. When you see these behind the scenes featurettes, you kind of get that impression. And obviously they're edited and cut to put, you know, positive light on the filmmaking process, but it's hard to hide somebody's joy, if that makes sense, you know?
And in this day and age too, I mean, like, you know, you just see like another Sony film like Madame Web and stuff like that. Like the reports that were coming out even before the film hit, like even before the box office and stuff like that, So to hear all this positive with the film and then to see this footage, again, like you said, it's easy to put a positive spin on something, but you do feel like that there was love, there was passion that went into this film. And again, just like you said earlier, Gil kind of had his hand in a lot of different things in terms of things typically directors, co-writers may not be doing. And I think that just kind of shows his love for Ghostbusters. Because I know if I was in his shoes, I would likely be doing the same thing.
I mean, it's kind of weird to think about this, but like, I mean, we were all at the firehouse on the Wednesday before the movie came out, right? Jason, you and I rode there in an Ecto 1 with JD Raymond. We were super excited. And we get out and we're there for like 15 minutes and who comes around the corner but Gil, right? Like there was no reason he needed to be there.
No.
Right? Like he's there literally to be like, oh, I wonder how the firehouse is coming along. Like it's just to be like, I came all the way down to Varick Street just to look and be like, I wonder how this is coming together for this thing tomorrow that he doesn't have to have any involvement in. You know, like it's a thing that he could just be like, I'm a director of the movie. When I get there tomorrow, I guess those people who are doing the PR stuff and doing the marketing will have stuff done, you know? And it's kind of like amazing to see how invested he was like through the production process, but even all the way to post-production that he was showing up, you know, the day before anything's going on at the firehouse just to take a look, just cause, you know, why not go down and see what's going on? And then it's kind of amazing that we have such invested creators. And I think we're incredibly lucky. I think these featurettes kind of illustrate just how lucky we are to have deeply invested folks working on these films. You know, like we've heard that too, just in the last few weeks of people who've worked on the films, who've come on the podcast and talked with me while I apparently kicked the two of you to the wayside. But, like, I'm kidding, obviously, but like realistically, that's part of my favorite part about these featurettes is they illustrate, you know, just how invested everybody who's working on the project seemed to be, you know? So the one featurette that I watched and I will kind of want to talk about in a way that might be a little bit critical, and I'm not sure how the two of you feel about this, and maybe this is just me, but I watched the Easter eggs featurette and it kind of frustrated me. And I think this is why. I think I'm done with needing Easter eggs in my Ghostbusters movie. Like, I want proton packs. I want the Ecto 1. If the orange thing shows up, that's fun and interesting. But the emphasis on Easter eggs as a thing to sort of point out is something I'm kind of just a little bit over. And I talked about this a while back that I feel like some of the reaction people had to the movie was because they watched a series of trailers that were full of Easter eggs, and they have been sort of trained to look for Easter eggs from Afterlife. Like, look, we're going to tell you about all the Easter eggs and they're all in there. And when you see it, there's going to be a whole bunch of them to look for. And so the Easter eggs become a distraction from the story. And so if you, the first time you watch that movie, you are looking at Frozen Empire, looking for Easter eggs from the trailer. And that's where some people walked out disappointed. But when you come back to the movie the second time, you repeatedly talk to people and they're like, I thought it was better the second time. And it's because in my mind, they're no longer looking for dumb crap, right? They're no longer looking for references to the previous movies so that there can be some like aha moment of finding an Easter egg. And in some ways, like, I didn't like the way in which this featurette almost like, on the one hand, treated some things as Easter eggs that I was like, that's not an Easter egg. It's just a thing that exists in the Ghostbusters universe. And on the other hand, it kind of glorifies this Easter egg hunt that I just kind of want to be over. I'm like, let the new version, it's not a new version. Let the continuation of Ghostbusters happen. Let there be things that appear that are important because they're part of the set design. The black and white photo in the back of the firehouse should totally be there. Why wouldn't it be? Like, these different things should totally just be part of our universe because they always have been, rather than they're there because they're things to identify and then be like, wow, I found something, you know? And so I don't know, maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just the way I've been looking at this since thinking about the trailers and the movie itself and sort of the way I feel like marketing of Easter eggs hurt initial reactions to the movie amongst fans. But I don't know. I just felt like it was a kind of a featurette that I went, I didn't need this. Like, I get that it's there and it's kind of fun because it lets you know about Easter eggs in the movie. But to me, a lot of those things I didn't look at this time around and go, oh, I found an Easter egg. I just went, oh, it's Ghostbusters. So of course there's slime blowers.
Yeah, it was probably my least favorite watch of all the featurettes. It was just kind of meh, like unnecessary. And I think maybe it's just like the broad word of Easter egg. Like if you're gonna put stuff in the background and like not really mention it, and it's cool, it gives it that fun rewatchability, you know, things you see you didn't notice the first time in the background and stuff, as long as it's not something that they like zoom in on and throw in your face. But it does get a little blurry with these legacy sequels. Like, is it an Easter egg, or is this just proving that they're still in the same universe and the story is continuing?
Yeah,
and it's in the firehouse. It's always been in the firehouse, so it's going to be there. So it is a little meh. Does it really matter? Did we really need this? No.
I think there's a pretty big difference if it's like a world building type thing. Like when it comes to like the Manhattan Bank, for example.
Yeah.
That's
cool.
That's an Easter egg.
Yeah. Like, okay, I guess you could classify it as such, but it's a world building type thing. But then at the same time, you've got a world builder like the Dana Barrett advertisement outside of the public library. But at the same time, that is still very much an Easter egg. I like those a lot more than, hey, here's, you know, a helmet from the slime or the river slime scene.
Right.
You know, just kind of like hucked in somewhere randomly nowadays. I think we should be past that. But I do like the more subtle stuff, you know, Phoebe wearing a shirt with the little emblems from the Neutrino one, things like that. I dig.
That was probably like the only real surprise in that whole featurette was that one. Yeah.
Right.
That one.
Well,
which is one of the cooler ones.
I did not know about the bank thing on the bikes. And as a former New Yorker who now lives here and who knows what city bikes are, meaning they are sponsored by Citibank, I thought it was great that they were like, hey, well, of course, in New York City, the free bike usage or the cheap bike usage is sponsored by a bank. Let's make it the first bank, you know, that they interacted with in the first movie. That to me, I agree. Like, I like that at a lore building level, like, oh, this is a bank that exists in New York City, the same way the Sedgwick Hotel exists in New York City within our universe, right? But like, it's those other kind of pieces where I'm like, yeah, like Jason, I think that's a good example. Like, oh, it's the helmet. And it's like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, I'm actually more excited about the fact there was Crystal Head vodka in that Raise a Cult, because I'm like, that's funny. Like, they made that canon. Like, apparently in that world, there's a Dan Aykroyd who owns that. And there's also Ray Stantz. But like, to me, that's kind of almost like a funnier Easter egg, because it takes something that is in our world and is playful about it, as opposed to just trying to get me to remember a thing I saw once 35 years ago, you know, and then be like, oh, that's the thing you saw. There's your reference to make you feel like it's the same thing. And, you know, like John Rothman in a really weird way, like he's almost like an Easter egg, right? Like his appearance in the movie is like, this guy has been the same library administrator for how long, you know, and it's cool that he's there, but I was happy to see him. But like, if he hadn't been in the movie, I wouldn't have been like, oh, missed opportunity. You know, like, don't anybody tell him that. I might see him in New York in a few weeks. They're like, dude, that was mean. But I'm not saying that in a way that's like his performance is bad. I just mean there's a certain level where you go, okay, how many callbacks do I need to be reminded of before you're just asking me to look for them and pay attention to them? And I'll get off this in a second and let one of you respond to me because I'm babbling. But like the analogy I'm going to give you, some people are going to like bristle the minute I say this. I want you to think about Ghostbusters 2016 for a second. And the thing in that movie, Tony, nobody can see that for that nonverbal response. They would articulate it for everybody. No, I'm kidding. But I think about that movie, and the thing that pulls me out of that movie repeatedly is the need to make some sort of reference to the 84 movie. It's to give me Easter eggs of the 84 movie in some fashion. And the one that always made me the most go like, why is this here? Was the bust of Harold Ramis, where it's like, yep, that's Egon from the other movie. Why do I need that in this universe to validate this universe? Does that make sense? Like, and so I don't know. That's just the me thing maybe, but like, I kind of hope for, if we are going to have another Ghostbusters movie moving forward, that we can kind of move forward with our characters now and focus a little less on making sure that everything we know from 40 years of Ghostbusters has to have a moment.
I don't really know what else they can pull from. I mean,
there's
after the last two films, I think the well is kind of dry, I think, when it comes to Easter eggs, unless you're going to have like, I don't know, the next one, they're going to attach like a ghost vacuum to the top of the Ecto-1 and maybe like do like a nod to the old Nintendo game or the old like original. Like,
They're going to go to a building with a blinking sign that says Zool.
Yeah.
Just
The
over
Zool
and over
building.
again.
Maybe it's just the title of that featurette 2, the Easter eggs unleashed. Like, there's really not that many in that featurette. Like, there's a lot more, I feel, than what is actually mentioned in that.
Well, I think also too, like we're looking at it through the eyes of like the hardcore fan. We're not the general, just like moviegoer person, right? Like we've already kind of like studied every single frame of this flick. So I do feel like I think the average person will watch it and then they'll be like, "Hey, did you know about this or did you know about that?" And they think they've realized something. They've
Yeah, it's
struck
for my
gold with
dad.
this.
It's
Yeah.
for my dad. It's like a thing my dad would watch, and then he'd come back to me and be like, "Did you know about the orange thing?" And I'd be like, "Of course I know about the orange thing. What are you, insane?" Like, but like, that's essentially what it's for. Like,
At Thanksgiving dinner, he'll just be like, "Jim, the sign they had in the
Yes.
first movie, it's in
leaning.
the attic. Jim."
right. That's
But I think I found a very hard to find hidden Easter egg. I don't know if it's so much like an Easter egg or what you want to classify it as or whatever, but in the light the candle scene, the lighter that Ray Stantz uses, the Zippo, I'm almost positive it's really hard to see and you can barely see it, but I think there's a Manhattan Adventurers Society logo on that lighter, that old Zippo, and it does look like it's an antique lighter too. So I think that if that's true, it's a cool little nod. Like they're trying to keep everything in the same universe, but
yeah, but even then, that's not so much to me an Easter egg as much as it's stuff in the universe within the same movie. You know, it's so
it's just it's the word Easter egg that really throws it all off. And
yeah. And I feel like in the next movie, like somebody will order takeout from Melody's Diner and they'll be like, "Look at the Easter egg in the last movie." And you're like, okay, like it's just, it's the point where you go, okay, references are okay, but we don't need to sort of like focus on them as the thing to be looking for. And I think, you know, I'll say it one more time and I'll be done with it. But like, I think that's what caused some of that initial negative reaction, you know, to like, oh, it's not what I saw in the trailer, because people were primed to go look for a bunch of Easter eggs. They were shown were going to be in a trailer, or were influencers were walking on the set to go interact with things that were going to be Easter eggs, you know? And so, I don't know, less focus on Easter eggs would be good. Not because it's like unfun to have those things in the movie. You could even have them in there. We just don't need the framing of like, look for the stuff.
There's some in there that they do a great job with, like the callback, or like all the old like Kenner commercials and the Ray Parker Jr. music video and such like that, like being featured in that news report. It's done so well, and I think stuff like that, again, being used in a news report, being used for world building, it has its place. But I think we should be past the point of just being like, again, hey, there's a slime scooper.
Yeah,
right. Like when I saw those things in the movie, I did not think of them as Easter eggs. Right. I didn't go, oh, there's an Easter egg. It's the Kenner trap. I went, oh, that's amazing. They've decided to make it such that Ghostbusters was such a phenomenon that the toys we interacted with were legit within the universe. And that's a piece of world building. Right. Like, and that's like, I think that's 100% on point. Like in terms of what you're saying is that when it functions as a piece of world building, it's great. When it's just like, this is a thing to reference, and now we want to remind you that you should be looking for, like, leave it in the background. That's great. Let us find it. Let us uncover Easter eggs on our own, rather than marketing to us to look for the Easter eggs, which then becomes the activity by which some people are going to go in and engage the movie, as opposed to engage its story, you know? And like, and that's just, I mean, to be fair, that's what people have kind of been told and expected to do since Afterlife was in pre-production or was in production. So I don't know, like, it's just a thing to consider, but for that reason, it kind of wasn't my favorite featurette, because I just went, all right, I don't want you to kind of point them all out for me and make this what we're doing. Like, let's focus on story. But does it hurt anything? I guess not, but maybe I'm just nitpicking, but I don't know.
That being said, I want that shirt Phoebe has with the little proton pack logos all over it as a design. I want that shirt.
Yeah. I think we all do. Maybe somebody over at like Magnolia Clothiers or someone will do it. I don't know. That would be good. Anything else about sort of the deleted scenes or the featurettes or anything else we saw from the digital release so far that you want to talk about?
I'm just hoping there's more. I mean, I know we're going to touch on like the 40th anniversary and stuff like that, but I'm just really surprised the fact that, we got this new film. We have so much footage, so many scenes that apparently didn't make the cut from the trailers that still didn't make the cut on the deleted and extended scene list, to only have a little over an hour of special features and like 75-80% of that is featurettes. I just want more. That's really it. I don't think we're going to be getting anything in time for the 40th, because obviously we need to have the standard DVD release, but maybe, or DVD and Blu-ray release, but maybe next year, something, maybe if they decide to pull the trigger, maybe, they announce another Ghostbusters movie, maybe it's something in celebration for the upcoming Netflix series. I don't know. But yeah, I just want to see more, and I want to know more about what was cut and really why it was cut. I would love to have like a sit down interview with Gil, and post all the hype building and everything for the film, where it can just be kind of discussed and knowing more about Ray Stance's resentful side and him getting kind of benched and everything. And maybe some of those scenes that again, just did not make it in the final film.
Yeah, I hear that. I also hope there's a lot more. And I think you're probably right that I think the rumor is that the actual physical release may drop towards the end of June. So the likelihood that we're going to get like some sort of announcement of, an ultimate box set that doesn't come in a trap and instead comes in a containment unit on the 40th is probably, probably low at that point. I think given that the physical release will still be coming, on the heels of the digital. So, Tony, any other thoughts on the digital release or the content therein?
I think the featurettes are really fun and well done, but like Jason said, that I would like more. Just having just the deleted scenes really wasn't that much there. Kind of was maybe expecting a little bit more, having seen things in trailers and stuff like that. Like there's still more, and we know there's still more. And I'd like to see it.
I think the thing I want to see more of, for like the most specific thing I can think of, is that even in these featurettes, there's really only one of them that actually engages the discussion of melody. And you get the impression that like, because there was this attempt to kind of keep Emily Allen Lynn's character under wraps and keep Melody's plot points under wraps most, that they didn't really shoot a lot behind the scenes to talk about that character either. There is like the one piece in the featurette that's about making the ghosts, where they talk about like how her flames were created by shooting reference flames on a dummy and stuff, and then compositing them onto her character and shooting things transparently.
Really cool. Like that was really freaking cool.
Really awesome. Like I just figured they just, made like CG flames to know that they actually went and like lit a dummy on fire to figure out how to get that effect was really cool. But like, I want to know more about that. I think that's the piece of the movie that we all kind of walk away still wanting to know a lot more about, is what was the dynamic supposed to be between these characters, or was there a deeper level of dynamic between, Phoebe and Melody? What was Melody's background intended to be in terms of, what age she's from, what period of time she's from, et cetera. And that's something we've debated about and heard debate about on different podcasts. And so I hope that in future iterations of like vignettes and featurettes and things that we get from this movie and deleted sequences we get more of Emily Allen Lind, because I think that there's probably more backstory there and more explanation of that arc that we haven't seen, and at the same time, as they were trying to keep a lot of that under wraps, I think they probably captured a lot less of it when they were like, hey, let's bring teams on to do behind the scenes, shooting, because that was the biggest thing. It's kind of odd to think about it, but like her reveal and sort of her arc and where she plays in it is almost the bigger reveal than Kumail's, because Kumail's is going to happen over the course of many minutes, right? It's going to happen throughout the entire arc of the movie, whereas Emily's turning point is the climactic thing that changes the entire story when it happens. So if you spoil it, it kind of ruins everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes total sense.
I will say though, if we're talking about her character, being a ghost and having a matchbook and all this stuff and everything, I feel if they did reveal her earlier on in terms of promotional material, commercials, adverts, what have you, it would have been so incredibly easy to piece together the ending of this film in advance, because the trailers already showed you pretty much the ending of the film with Garaka at the firehouse and everything. It would have just been so easy just to be like, okay, I get it. I know what's going to happen. And yeah, it'll be that surprise of Kumail's character becoming the fire master. You know, they didn't really say anything about that, but it would have just been so easy to figure it out beforehand.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think that we went in and not knowing what he was going to be doing in the movie, and that's great.
Mhm.
You know, I think that's like one of those key things that we didn't get spoiled for us in the lead up to the movie. And it wasn't something that, you know, you had to hunt for with Easter eggs, whatever. I mean, a lot of us were kind of just like trying to figure out what his role was in the movie. And we were like, well, he's a collector guy or something. And maybe he's going to be possessed or whatever. But like some of those beats we had figured out going in, but we hadn't really pieced together that he was going to be.
People were thinking he's the bad guy. People were
Yeah.
thinking James Acaster was going to be a bad guy and get possessed and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you know, it's funny, as a friend of mine from back home who I've known for many years watched this movie a couple days ago. And he said to me, I really thought James Acaster was going to be Oscar. And I said, we've been there and done that, my friend. But like, yeah, I mean, like, if you think about the number of things we thought were going to happen, there's lots of stuff we got wrong. And I think a lot of us in the marketing, but you know, the movie we got in the end, I think is really great. And I'm glad we got to see these deleted scenes. Now I agree with both of you. Like, I want more. Show me what else is out there if there's more of it, because I will buy more if you want to show me more, but you got to offer it first. Are you listening, Ghost Core? Anybody out there? You all listen to this podcast, right? That's how this works. Come on. Well, we've kind of covered this digital release, but we do have something coming up down the pike ahead of us. Something pretty important that, you know, only happens once, and it's the 40th anniversary of Ghostbusters. We're just a few weeks away at this point. We're less than a month, right? And so we're like 3 weeks from the 40th anniversary of Ghostbusters, the 35th anniversary of Ghostbusters 2. Is there anything that either of you are like hoping for to happen with the 40th anniversary? We have some ideas. There's Hasbro stuff that's in the wings. We've, you know, kind of been told that there's these O-ring figures coming and potentially other things being announced. We know there's still supposed to be a cartoon coming this year, we think, or something. So I don't know. Just, I wanted to get a sense from the two of you what you think about the 40th.
It's kind of crazy to even think about. Like, it's the 40th anniversary, and it feels like Ghostbusters is as popular, if not more popular, than it's ever been.
Well,
Like,
Kim
it's-
Kardashian's kids are having parties, so of course it is.
Exactly. If that's going on, you know the franchise is hot. So
Yeah, I don't want to hear anything about like box office. I'm just going to show people photos of Kim Kardashian's kid's birthday party
yes,
going forward.
famous people's kids' birthday cakes.
Hey,
Yes.
not to get bogged down in it, but I do wonder what Kanye's reaction was to that birthday party. He was like, "That's bullshit. I think Ghostbusters sucks." He'd be like the one person on planet Earth,
The one person,
who
yeah.
thinks Ghostbusters is bad. But I digress. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you're right. Like, it's still super popular 40 years on, right?
Just some sort of like official announcements of what's going to be coming up in the future. Like
Yeah.
we like not so much, you know, announcing the next movie. I mean, that would be cool, but like just whatever's next, like an official announcement for whether it be Netflix series, animated film, or whatever. Just an announcement that it's going to keep chugging along.
Yeah, I agree. Like announcements would be nice. I think at this point, I mean, it's been a while now. We've got to take a gander. We got to take a first look at this Netflix series. I think there has to be something shown, whether it being just like a photo, character design, maybe a telling as to exactly how it's going to fit in the timeline, and you know what it's going to be about. Just at least more information on it. But I would love to see a clip. That would be. That would make my Ghostbusters day. But yeah, definitely more announcements. I honestly feel like though we may get something in regards to, I don't know. I feel like Jason and Gil, they both had a hand at Ghostbusters, and I feel like they may, to some degree, they'll still look over it, but they may turn over the reins in terms of directing to someone else for something else. Whether that being a new movie, whether that being a television series, like a live action. I don't know. I feel like there could be something in the wings. And I don't know. Again, box office withstanding when it comes to Frozen Empire, the digital sales. I just feel like there may be something in the wings when it comes to it that cost-wise may not be around that $100 million figure or whatever it is that Sony Pictures has yet to kind of confirm when it came to Frozen Empire. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's something there. I think also maybe an obvious one will be Dark Horse Comics announcing a continuation of their series too.
Well, I mean, to be fair, that has been announced already on this wonderful podcast.
On this podcast.
You know what, Jim? I just want to say, last year on Ghostbusters News, we talked about the Manhattan Bank being shown on set, and you just said you figured it out now. So there you go. I can throw it back in your face too. Ha.
I'm not throwing anything in your face, I assure you. But David Boer did mention that when he was on here that they have already greenlit a second set of comics, and he is helping to helm them. So maybe they'll announce that from Dark Horse's position, though, like on a stage. That may happen. That could be a thing. Yeah.
That's what I meant. You don't have to correct me. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
I assure you, I am not correcting you. I am simply supplementing what you're saying.
I know. I'm just excited, man. I'm jazzed over everything, even though we know nothing.
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't know anything. That's why I was like, what do you want? Because we don't really know anything. That's always the fun part of being Ghostbusters fans, right? As we are 3 weeks away from a 40th anniversary in which we would expect that something would have been announced, but nothing's been announced except that our fan event is happening, which is awesome. I'm really excited that the things are happening at the Firehouse at Hook and Ladder 8, that the NYC Ghostbusters and Buffalo Ghostbusters are like coordinating all kinds of things. And like, I don't even know, there's like 5 ectos or something coming out at this point, like from different places all over the country. And this year it's like not like, 5 ectos where most of them are GMC Blazers, but like this year it's like 5 ectos where most of them are Cadillacs. And so it's kind of wild that like, for me, when I go, what do I want right now? I'm like, I would like Ghost Corps to acknowledge the 40th anniversary of Ghostbusters. Like there has to be some sort of acknowledgement of it. And I hope it's not,
there's totally going to be. Yeah. You're not just going to get like a social media post or anything like that. Like, hey, it's the 40th.
No, I mean, that would be crazy, right? Like if it's just like, hey, here's the deal. We're offering a 10% off coupon on Ghostbusters toys over on Hasbro Pulse. That's the celebration.
I figure as we near it, give it another week or two, I think we're going to hear something. I think there'll be some kind of event happening, whether that being something, them maybe teaming up with the New York event, whether that being something in Los Angeles at their Culver City lot. I don't know, but I cannot see them going through the 40th anniversary and not doing something just over the top spectacular, celebrating, commemorating the big day.
Yeah, I think that's, if you don't do it, it's a missed opportunity, right? So you would tend to think that there must be something coming. And I've kind of joked about it in the last week that like, I don't think it's too late to be thinking about something like that, because the last time they did something on the lot for Ghostbusters Day, you were reporting on it on May 26th of 2022. So like that may be what you're doing Memorial Day weekend. I just want to let you know. Like, do you even have Memorial Day in Canada? It doesn't even matter. You're allowed to work. We're just us. We get the weekend off. You don't.
I work from home. My weekends don't even exist anymore. What are you talking about? Holidays and vacation days. None of that matters anymore to me.
Well, we get a paid federal holiday here. And it's the official start of summer. I don't know what happens in Canada. Maybe on that weekend, that's when you all celebrate the end of moose hunting season or something. I don't know. But
we resurrect our Canadian Walmart Zellers, and we have our big Z burgers.
Big Z burgers. That's right.
Yeah. It's a great day. It's just a wonderful day.
Hey, can we get big Z burgers inside the VR headset? Is that a thing? Because you've been trying to get me to buy the VR headset for going to the 90s Little Caesars.
People,
and
let me tell you.
Let me say that recently you sent me footage that you can dress up as Gozer and like, I'm going to go get some cheesy bread at a Kmart in the 1990s inside a VR headset. So the key question at this point is, can we go to Zellers? If you, me, and Tony all get VR headsets, can we go to Zellers together?
Man, I'm sure Tony right now is confused, and the majority of the listeners are also confused. For those that don't know, on VR, like the format, there's an app called VR Chat, and you can go into digital hubs. And yes, I like to frequent a Kmart from the 1990s where there's a Little Caesars on the inside. And I've been sending Jim alluring photos of me dressed up as Gozer. Well, it's a Gozer avatar, not really me dressed up as Gozer, but it's a Gozer avatar. And I'm like holding pizza and cheesy bread. And I'm like, come here, big boy. But he still hasn't. He still hasn't. So
look, I'm just glad you finally, like, I have been saying on the podcast for a little while now that you have been trying to get me to buy the VR headset to play the Ghostbusters game with you, and that your bonus is this. And I think that most people thought I was probably just making it up, but you just gave them the testimony. So thank you.
Yeah. Every Monday, VR chat, meet me at Kmart. I'll be there. We can do like a weekly gathering.
It's Blue Light Special. That's what we're going to do. We'll call it that.
It's so good. It's so good.
What if we create a spin-off podcast? It's just called the Blue Light Special, and it's just what we record while sitting inside of a virtual Kmart.
I'd be down for that.
That'd be cool.
That's fun.
I don't really know how we got here from the 40th anniversary. This doesn't really fit anywhere else in the podcast. So anybody listening who's like, you guys just completely derailed. You're not wrong, but it's happened several times. You just didn't know about it till now because we edited around it. But this is like, the more you entice me with these photos of fake pizza and the fact that I can dress like, spooky deities, the more I'm like, maybe this actually is a thing I need in my life.
You know what? I'm going to do all my coverage this year from the virtual Kmart. So if you want Ghostbusters Day coverage from Ghostbusters News, that's where I'll be. I'll be like broadcasting to like some 8-year-old who just continuously runs around me in circles and curses at me. But that'll be my coverage.
Wait, is that what you're suggesting VR is like? It's just 8-year-olds running around cursing at people?
If you're playing VR, that's all it is. That's all.
Gotcha.
They have like a fox's tail on their back and I don't know, pink hair. It's a wild world.
Brought to you by End Dreams. No, just kidding. I think that the 40th anniversary is a really important thing, and I'm trying to get back to some semblance of reality what we're talking about here. The 40th anniversary is a key event, I think, for Ghostbusters in terms of its future success. I mean that. Like, I want to see this blown up for the second half of the year. I think that
if Sony doesn't do anything, it is going to be the biggest gut punch to fans.
I think so. Look,
something's going to happen. There's no way.
That's like we're out in the middle of the ocean and like we need to get home and they just stopped all the wind hitting our sail. Like that's what it'll feel like.
In a weird way, I feel like what's going to happen is we're going to get a lot of merchandise and we're going to get potentially like some announcements about media that's coming. And we'll get a 40th anniversary event, but the back end of the year might not have the same 40th anniversary appeal to it. And this is my justification for this, and it's maybe sound weird, but like for the 35th anniversary, there was a lot of 35th branded merchandise, like that said 35th right on the box. And then it was still around during 36 and 37. And so it was like, it immediately became stuff that was aged. Right. That kind of like was no longer ripe. And in contrast, like if you look at the Hallmark ornament that's coming out, right? The Hallmark ornament without question is celebrating a movie from 40 years ago. Like the Hallmark ornament is not something that's coming from Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. It is a Hallmark ornament of Stay Puft climbing a building and like 4 proton streams hitting him in the chest. The one thing it doesn't say on it is Ghostbusters 40th. Right. And I wonder if that is a conscious decision to sort of keep merchandise more ripe by not talking about that merchandise in relationship to the 40th, or if we're going to see like a glut of merchandise on the back end of the year that is 40th branded. And I kind of think we're going to see less specifically branded merch because that means the merch stays viable and they don't have to repackage it or rebrand it later. But I could be wrong. We'll see.
I feel like there could also be maybe more of a shift towards higher end quality merch, like for the higher end collector out there. I mean, obviously, like I would love to see Hasbro continue Plasma series. I mean, they've got the O-ring figures coming out and all that, but just with the announcement of the upcoming Real Ghostbusters action figures from Mondo, like those will be a little bit higher tier in terms of cost.
Right.
You're seeing a lot of statue companies and such like that announce collectibles, figurines. I'm kind of curious if we're going to see maybe more of that later this year, and that's going to be kind of the majority outside of the obvious like Halloween tie-ins.
Yeah, that may be true.
Yeah, maybe more potential like third-party customers and people who get the license and stuff will take more advantage of the 40th anniversary as an excuse to make some products and stuff and take advantage of it more than Sony might. But yeah, the more stuff the merrier, and a lot of these companies are making some stuff that we've haven't really seen, at least in like a high-end collectible form. So the more of that would be great.
Yeah, I'm stoked about those Mondo figures as a good example of that. You know, like
yeah, I'm excited to see what they do for sure.
They're gonna cost a little more than I probably would usually spend on something of that type, but I don't care. I'm kind of the mindset that like I want a good set of detailed figures from real Ghostbusters that look like the characters from the cartoon rather than look like the Kenner figures. And that's not to put down on the Kenner figures, but like the Kenner figures are approximations of cartoon characters. They're not sculpted to match the cartoon characters. You know, they match in colors, but then nobody sat down and was like, let's make sure the Winston face looks like the Winston face in the cartoon. Like, look, we'll put 2 black dots for the eyes and we'll call it done. Like
the other big thing I'm curious about though, when it comes to Mondo is, the figures that they're going to crank out, the collectibles they're going to release here. Are they taking into account a possibility of like fitting in with other lines, maybe like the old Kenner, like, in terms of like the look, the design, obviously they're going to be higher tier. They're going to look better, especially for the price point that they're going to charge. They should look better, but I'm just kind of curious about if they're going to kind of like try and maybe blend it a little more smoothly when it comes to your other Ghostbusters collectors or other collectibles, or instead, are they just like, okay, we're starting fresh, we're starting new, and we want you to have like a full shelf, 100% of just Mondo, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, I think scale wise, they're going to be bigger than the Kenner figures were.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But that doesn't mean they won't display nicely next to, say, like some of the accessories from the Kenner line, or like some of the bigger ghosts and stuff that might fit really well with. So yeah.
I'm just excited to see what they do in general. Like to actually see things that we've never gotten, the actual toys or adult collectibles that were actually in the animated series that we never saw. Kenner never actually really made anything that was actually in the cartoon for the most part. It was just kind of stuff that they just made up that was toyetic and used the name The Real Ghostbusters. You never actually got your Sam Haines and Boogeymans and stuff like that. So whatever they do, it's going to be awesome because we're finally getting something based on the animated series and how it looked in the actual cartoon. So I don't think they can really go wrong because there's so much actually missing. As big as the Kenner line is, there's so much missing from the cartoon. So they got a big, huge sandbox to play in.
And like when it comes to the Real Ghostbusters, I'm just kind of thinking like, has there ever been like anything since the Kenner line that was Real Ghostbusters based that was 100% using sculpts for Real Ghostbusters? Like I'm thinking like Diamond Select, they had their figures, but they were just like reusing sculpts in the movie. They had their mini mates. Again, there was unique pieces there, especially with the ghosts, and they did a great job with that. But it was still very much like the core innards was still kind of reused. The only thing I can really think of is Mattel had like those like retro
Migos.
1970s style figures, like the Migos. Yeah. But outside of that, like I feel like this is going to be like one of those, again, since the Kenner days, the very first Real Ghostbusters figures that are meant to be Real Ghostbusters figures. And knowing Mondo's history and seeing their quality and seeing all the other stuff they do, like Master of the Universe and stuff like that, like it pretty much feels like these things are going to look like they just like leapt right off the screen.
Yeah.
And from what I've heard too, like, because we've all seen the concept sculpts.
The fan sculpts. They were fan
sculpts
concepts.
that Alex did. And from what I've heard and from watching toy podcasts and like Toy Anxiety and Geek Dead Life and all that, and the word on the street is that the actual sculpts that they're moving forward with, as far as what they're going to actually produce, are even way better than those fan sculpts, which is insane because those fan sculpts are amazing. Like they're like everything we've wanted, and they're saying that like what actually is going to be made is even better than what was teased or shown off like last October or whatever it was. That's
I mean,
really exciting.
to call it a tease is like almost unfair because it wasn't even like a planned like product.
No,
it was
it's
like
even
more like a concept that people went crazy about, and people are like, "Wow, you could have something that good," and now the expectation is almost that they're going to be even better than that. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny we're talking about this because like we're not going to get any update about those probably for the 40th, given that Mondo said their next point of giving us an update on that is San Diego Comic-Con. And I was thinking about this the other day, like that may be the only Ghostbusters news we get at San Diego Comic-Con because Sony doesn't usually go to SDCC. So like, or at least they don't usually go there for Ghostbusters, right? So I'm like, that might be kind of funky that like we're going to get a piece of Ghostbusters news at SDCC that just doesn't come from Sony and instead comes from Mondo. But the thing some of us are most anticipating, most excited about won't actually be a thing we hear more about on Ghostbusters Day. So, I mean, that's not to say like the O-ring figures aren't cool that are coming out, but like, I'll be honest, like I'm way more interested in those real Ghostbusters figures than I am in having like another set of the 4 guys from Hasbro in a different form factor, etc. So, and I'm interested to see like, will Hasbro announce something else? Like they said they were going to tell us there's more coming. For Ghostbusters Day. That was part of what they put out when they had that conference. When they were at the con and talked about the O-ring figures, was that details of that and more stuff was coming. So are we getting another HasLab potentially? Like, is there something else coming down the pike that they're going to announce? Are we maybe finally going to see some plasma series from Frozen Empire? Probably not. But like, I mean, my gut says no, but like, I want there to be,
it'd be awesome. Yeah. Having met Pat and Emily and some of the other people from Hasbro that are working on the Ghostbuster license, they're super passionate. Like they love the brand. Like if they could do half of the things that they have ideas for, it would be amazing. So the people behind it at Hasbro are definitely really passionate about the brand and would like to do more than what has been done. So just I think they got more coming. I wouldn't count Hasbro out for sure.
Yeah, I hope so. I really want to say thank you to both of you for coming on the podcast this week and kind of jumping into the digital release with me and kind of getting into deleted stuff. And I want to say that it's been really nice to have you both on the podcast and have you on just having a nice organic conversation, dealing with my meandering nonsense and being patient because it's been a challenge in the last couple of weeks with things going on here, and to be able to reconnect with 2 of my friends and have a fun conversation and sort of take the load off a little bit is really nice. It's always good to talk with both of you. You're both really great friends, and it's why I think everybody should support everything you do. But beyond that, thank you for coming on the podcast this week. Any final words to tell people before we sign off?
Is that your nice way of like calling us commoners and not celebrities like you've had over the past couple of weeks? Because I feel like that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not at all what it is, because the reality is that you are a celebrity in your own right, and this is what happens is if you come back to New York and you go outside the firehouse, the first thing that's going to happen to you is like 7,000 people are going to walk up to you and be like, I know you from YouTube. I'm so glad to meet you. And I'm going to go, the beauty of podcasting is that most people have no idea what I look like.
Well, we all know the only reason why Jason and I are on this episode is because John Rothman canceled. So
that's not true at all. John Rothman's never been booked as a guest on this podcast, and he probably would.
That would be an awesome episode. But you have seriously been killing it, though. You've had some great guests on. It's been great to hear people that have been involved in the movie, and just your continued, production quality of the show is just getting better and better and better too. And I'm honestly just a huge fan of the show. So being able to come on it and be a part of it is awesome. And I'm a huge fan of Ghostbusters news as well. And to be able to call Jason a friend and both of you guys friends is one of the highlights. So it's always fun to come on.
I appreciate everything you're saying, except for the part about how it's well produced. That's just because we cut out all of the mess,
well edited,
that I make. But I appreciate that.
Well edited. No, I mean the show itself. I mean, it's been not that it was ever down, but it's always been onwards and upwards. I feel like every week it gets better. Fantastic guests as of late, despite Tony and I getting the chef for quite a while there. But no, loved your special features. I can't wait to see more or hear more special guests on the show in the coming weeks, in the coming months. yeah, no, I'm elated for the continued success of Extraplasm podcast, as well as, the success of Fantazm Toys, which you should check out on phantasmtoys.com.
You definitely should. And as much as I appreciate your comments about special guests, you two will always be the most special guests.
Oh God. I don't know how that lands.
Now, look, that lands in a positive way. That's not something. They're the most special. Oh my God. Just take a compliment, you Canadian.
I mean, I should, since I am Canadian, I should just be sorry about everything. You're right. I'm sorry. That's fine.
No,
sorry.
Currently, that's my role, is to be apologetic about most things happening and to go, why is everything my fault? And your job right now is to take compliments, and we'll just leave it there. But for real, I always enjoy talking with both of you, and you're a blast to have on the podcast, individually and together. I hope you'll obviously come back and join us again real soon, so we can chat with you more about things, and, you can come on and be the biggest, most special Ghostbusters celebrities I know.
Aw, shucks.
Thank you so much for coming on the show this week. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having us.
It's been a trip.
Oh, that's a non-committal statement, but I like you too. That about wraps things up for Extraplasm this week. I want to say one final thank you to Jason and Tony for coming on the show, for donating and dedicating their time to producing a really fun conversation about the Frozen Empire digital release, and really for being awesome and really cool people who I enjoy having around and who are good friends. I also want to say thank you, of course, to Brendan Pearce, Badoochi Studios, who designs our logo and is also a really awesome and cool friend who I've talked to at odd hours of the night on 18-hour time differences in the last few weeks. So thank you, Brendan, for being awesome and a great friend as well. And I want to say thank you to Vaporwave artist MAGNAVOX, whose version of Ghostbusters serves as our theme song each week. And of course, I want to thank you for tuning in, for listening, and for those of you who sent kind words after last week listening to the episode and sort of let me know that, I've got people in my corner and my family's corner. I want to say thank you especially to you. It was really kind to hear from folks. If I didn't get back to you right away, it might have been because I was a little overwhelmed by that sort of outpouring of niceness, but thank you for it. It was really kind. I hope that you'll continue to be in touch regardless of what's going on in my personal life. Of course, over at extraplasompodcast@gmail.com and via Instagram and X at Extraplasm, and of course over at Facebook by looking for Extraplasm Podcast. You all are amazing people. This community is wonderful. We're about to celebrate a 40th anniversary I'm so excited about. So get ready, get excited, and as Ernie Hudson reminds us every week,
Try to have fun and always keep on busting. Take care.